And Jeff, you can go ahead and do the determination of the quorum, and then when we get to the public comment, I'll introduce her.
Okay, looks like we're live.
Yes.
Okay, let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. It'll just be a regular meeting, May 13th, 2020. We've got everybody present. We do have a quorum. We can conduct business. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
So just a couple quick announcements. Next month, sounds like we could be back in the boardroom. We're still gonna, have it up live, the stream. And the boardroom will just be open to board members only at this time. Anybody else will have to come in via the YouTube. We have a guest speaker this morning, presenter. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mark. It looks like Ivy's here for the introduction.
Yeah, her audio is connecting, so we'll wait until that connects. Okay. Ivy, I'm going to give an introduction, and then you can go ahead and do your presentation for the board. Ivy Compton is the transit manager for Winter Park. On our agenda today, we have a request from Winter Park related to the electric transit buses. And it was actually on our agenda last month, but I could not find the actual letter that they had sent us. So there's a little bit more information in the packet this month. And with that, Ivy, I'll let you go ahead and do your presentation.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. Good morning, board. It's good to see all of you. I'm going to try and keep this as short as possible, since I'm sure you guys have all seen the documentation I sent over to Mark. The town of Winter Park is building a $21.3 million facility. We are hoping to future-proof this facility for electric vehicles. It's our goal by 2035 to switch over all of our currently diesel buses to zero-emission Proterra electric buses. So with this last low-no bus emission program, we recently applied for 3 Proterra 35-foot ZX5 Duo power buses, and a 1.5 megawatt charger. So we are a project total of over $4 million with a local share of the $562,398. So that local share will come from contributions from the resort in an agreement that we had when bus operations was switched over to the town of Winter Park. It'll come from our 2% sales tax contributions each year. And our ask from Mountain Parks Electric is $100,000 to help with that local requirement, that local share piece. So with that, we're really excited to start transitioning our fleet, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Our project is pretty straightforward. We're anticipating the buses arriving in 2022 to 2023, depending on the production schedule and if the grant is awarded, and the infrastructure will be installed as soon as the building is ready to go.
Any board member questions for Ivy? Kristen.
Question. Ivy, do you know if the charger has the capability to be bi-directional?
That is a great question. I believe it does. As of right now, we're probably not going to set that up right away. I'm still learning all the electrical infrastructure questions, so bear with me if I don't answer this 100% correct. But I believe the bi-directional helps to give power back to the grid. And helps with solar panels. Is that correct, Kristen?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So if in the future we were able to come to some kind of agreement where we could tap into that or help reduce loads during our peak periods, that could be beneficial for both you guys and us.
Absolutely. I think that's something that the town would definitely be on board with as we get the buses and as we start seeing greater loads. So.
And one comment I will make is that the East Grand School District, the bus that they were looking at was Proterra, and it was vehicle to grid. Unfortunately, that's the one that the grant didn't go through.
Okay.
Ivy, I had a question. This is Dick Zeef. You normally have a very heavy schedule in the winter time, and then in the rest of the season, you run buses through most of the county.
Yes, sir.
Will these buses be the ones that are going to be used during the summertime? That'd be my question. I want to make sure that we're going to get a full year's use out of these buses. So is there a commitment on the part of your transportation department that you'll be running the electric buses during the off season?
Yes, sir. So we are anticipating these buses running on our year-round block line. So that services the resort, town of Winter Park, Fraser, and it probably will circle through Granby sometimes in Tabernash, depending on, you know, the schedule and our block schedules and the way we route our buses. So I do fully anticipate that these 3 buses will be running year round. Every single one of our routes, we've determined that it's a 2-to-1 replacement ratio, regardless of our block line. So we'll have 75% of our route block line covered by these 3 buses. So we'll need 1 more bus to fully operate on the block line so we can completely remove diesel buses off of that main route.
Thank you.
Justin?
Absolutely.
What is the current, or I guess from this previous year, what was your 2% sales tax figures that you're pulling in Winter Park?
That's a great question. I'd have to get back to you on that with our finance director. But we operate a $2.5 million budget each year, and that includes all of our grants from state and federal funding. So,
Liz, you need to unmute yourself.
Oh dear, it's going to be one of those days. Justin, I actually looked that up. I want to say it was 2019 was around $2.5 million for the year, something like that. And then I started thinking, because I read the same thing in the letter saying that some of the sales tax would be applied to this. And I was curious about that. And then I started thinking, oh, well, the sales tax actually pays for the drivers and the maintenance of the buses and the interest on whatever building you're building. So it's all the ops as well as the capital.
yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it seems like, and I'm guessing you can't fully answer the question as to where the buses will run because Winter Park and you guys have a transportation district up there that's funding this with designated money, and other parts of the county haven't set up such a district or sales tax mechanism, and it's more annual or, well, they only make annual commitments, it seems like Granby.
Yes, ma'am. So we haven't fully been able to set up intergovernmental agreements with some of the other towns in Greene County. And so my hope is that we would be able to service the majority of the county, if not all of it, and all of the towns. But because of how expensive it is to run transit, yes, there needs to be some sort of financial contribution and participation from each town, just so we can, you know, make sure we have a bus out there to service their riders.
Other board questions?
Is this well, no, is this a once you get the bus, we commit to a certain dollar amount if the board chooses, and then once the grants are awarded, then and the buses are delivered, then the money flows from Mountain Parks. Is that kind of how the West Grand project worked?
With West Grand and East Grand, with our buses, they ordered them, and then we actually transferred our share of the buses to them once the bus was delivered and they were billed for it. And Ivy, I don't know if that's what you are envisioning with the transit buses.
Sure. So we'll find out if we're going to be awarded these buses in September. Typically, the way the Lono grant works is we apply for 3, they'll give us 2. So my hope is that we'll get all 3, but because of how competitive this is, you just never know. So in September, I'll be able to notify the board. With that, it'll take roughly 3 to 4 months to work through the FTA and CDOT processes to get the funds over to them. They'll start producing the buses and manufacturing them, and then at that point, we'll start sending in our finances. So we would request that dollar amount from you guys, and then we'll go ahead and pay back our portion of the local share.
Carl, did you have a question? Appears not. Go ahead, Kristen.
Just Ivy, congratulations. This is a really exciting development. I'm sure the community will be very supportive. Quick question for you. Do you happen to know what the kilowatt hour capacity of the batteries are?
I think it's 440, and then there was a 600 kilowatt hour. Shoot, Kristen, I'm sorry. I don't have the Proterra specs in front of me.
Oh, that's okay.
I could
That's around
totally
the
get
range
back to you
that I've
guys on
heard
that.
for buses. Thanks.
Okay.
Ivy, if you can send the information to me, I'll make sure the board gets the information that you've got.
Excellent. I will get those specs over to you guys.
And I'm guessing that based on those specs in your mileage numbers, you know, that you run the buses on, was some allowance made for cold weather. You have an idea of sort of total kilowatt hours a year you're going to use to power the buses. I'm guessing some of that.
Yes. Yes, ma'am. So in those low fidelity reports that we received from Proterra and the modeling, we determined that each of the buses in cold weather can travel up to 160 to 180 roughly, depending on the different route terrain. So with that bus replacement ratio, that 2-to-1 that I mentioned earlier, we've been able to determine that we can cover all of our routes, and they'll be able to move throughout the community all day during cold weather. So, and those reports were run with -30-degree weather. So that's pretty substantial cold weather for Winter Park, I think. So I feel like we have pretty good modeling to make sure that the buses run all day. So.
Ivy, this is Mark. I know that you probably don't have the answer for this question, but maybe you could check on it. You mentioned sales tax as going to fund part of this. Mountain Parks collects, processes, and then remits the sales tax. And Winter Park is one of only 2 of the jurisdictions within our service territory that does not provide a discount that helps to offset our costs of actually collecting and remitting the sales tax. Is that something that Winter Park would look at doing? Because there are costs on our side to do that. Most of the jurisdictions do it through the state. So we remit to the state, and the state discounts the amount that we need to remit to them.
Yes, that is something that I would have to bring back to our town manager and finance director, but I am certain that they would not consider that, and we could definitely have an answer back for you guys.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the board? It appears not. You're getting off easy this morning, Ivy. So thank you for getting the information to us. And if you want to send the other information, I'll make sure the board gets it. And then it is an item of discussion for us when we get into the discussion action items later today. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, board. I appreciate your guys' time and consideration. Have a great morning.
Thank you. All right, let's go to minutes of previous meetings. Everybody look at them? Any corrections, additions?
I think that Carl and I left the meeting later, not at 2:30, but it may be at 3:17 and 3:30. And the other comment I was gonna make is that under the discussion of the Shoshone method, and I don't know whether this is important or not, but the way we say the buyout number for Mountain Parks Electric, currently 206 million base percentage by use of all 42 cooperatives. That's the Shoshone method, which Tri-State has said isn't actually the buyout number. So I don't know whether making, should this become part of a record somewhere? I don't know whether it's important to make that distinction, because right now it just says the buyout number is 206.
Right. They use the Shoshone method as an indicative number for us so that the 42 co-ops could have some number idea. And they have indicated that the number is probably off by 10 to 20%, plus or minus.
Yeah.
I think using the word indicative, so just call it Mountain Parks indicative buyout number. You like that, Liz?
Yeah, and I think it should be mentioned that it's the Shoshone.
Indicative buyout number based on the Shoshone method.
Right. Yeah.
Would
Mark,
it
you think that's
also,
good?
given that this is going to be a record, may it also be useful to have in the record a sentence about this is approximately 3 times what other co-ops that have exited have paid based on their settlement amounts?
We can definitely put that in based on the 2 previous exits, and we can look at it, because I believe that both of those co-ops, they started with a Shoshone method number, and then the final number was obviously different than that methodology.
I would appreciate if we could add just 1 sentence at Mark's discretion, providing that context.
You said 3 times?
Well, Michelle, I'll work with you, because we want to make sure we get the percentage right, but we've got the numbers, and I'll get those to you, and we can put those in the minutes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you much.
I take it we did have that type of discussion, right?
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
Yeah, we did have that discussion.
Okay.
It was not part of the public version of our discussion, but the board did discuss it.
Good. Anything else?
Yeah, the other thing, when I was reading them, and I hate to do this, but when I was reading them and I looked at D10, that discussion about D10, the motion to change the board president or cooperative attorney and general manager concur. I think that is the language we used in that sentence, but it's unclear on where that in that policy that goes. And I read it again, and my memory's not getting any better as I get older. And it's like, oh, it goes under the part where all 3 of those people have to concur that it's not appropriate for a member to present to the board, which is, I don't know which part of that policy. But Levi, do you?
So yeah, real quick, it looks, so Michelle, I don't know if looking at the D10, was that intentional to have it blank after it was properly moved, seconded, or is that just a typo?
Yeah, it must have been a typo.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, actually, no. Let me double check.
We changed things around quite.
You changed things like 3 times in that one.
Sure. I guess my point would just be, we would need to, I mean, if it was moved and seconded to do something, we need to say what it was moved and seconded to do. So we're missing some language there.
Yeah, it was deleted. It was in there. Okay.
I agree. This needs a little more context, because the way that I read this, it seems like I'm trying to remove a director from this board, because all it says is Kristen amended to remove director.
Yeah, no. Yes, some of it got deleted somehow. So I'll take a look at my other one, because it has, something happened with the one.
Yeah,
there's another version, I think. I will adjust that.
Yeah, with this many changes, maybe it would be best to.
We bring it back in June.
Yep.
For the board's approval.
Perfect.
I think
take a look for that piece.
Or there. Yeah.
There was more to it. Thank you.
I'm sorry to be a nitpicker.
No, we want
that's good.
This to be clear, so that
don't apologize for doing your job, Liz.
Hey, I was on a roll for a while. There were no corrections for the last 4 months. So, it happens.
So do we need to bring the minutes back, or do we?
Yes,
think we can.
We'll bring them back in June, and
Okay.
the board can approve the minutes in June.
Okay. Anybody got anything else there? All right, Levi?
I don't have anything for open session. Any questions on my bill or anything else? we can handle an executive session.
Okay.
Oh, I guess I did want, just talking about the meeting next month. So if I remember right, we have the board meeting, then the annual meeting is that weekend, correct?
Yes.
So if it makes sense for you all, I'll attend the board meeting remotely and then be there in person on Friday for the vote count and for the annual meeting. Does that work?
Sounds
Yes.
good.
Okay.
Anybody got any questions for Levi over here? All right, Mark.
Okay, on the community solar, we finalized the lease. It's fully executed and we've got copies back now. We have surveys in process, both for mountain parks. We have to have a site survey for the lease. And then ISI is doing some soil and topographical surveys. And I believe their surveyor was out on site yesterday because as we were in Walden, we were trying to get access to them. There's a gate that you have to have a code, and we had the code, but they did not. So I think that is there, and we have the contract for it with ISI, and Levi and I are both reviewing that. It's similar to there's a master agreement, and then there are addendums for each of the projects that we did, the Whiskey Hill as well as the Tom Cyphers, and this is the same thing. There would be an addendum for the community solar. On the fiber, we've had several meetings with ADB, which is the contractor that we signed the contract with, and the potential partner that we discussed last month. We're reviewing the contracts that the potential partner sent us because there are a number of pieces. There's, I believe, 3 statements of work. There is a general contract with them. And then we'll provide more information in executive session on the specifics of the discussions that we've had moving forward based on the board's comments in April. And with that, I'll pause for a moment to see if anybody has any questions.
On the community solar, is it, as far as the size goes, is it 2 megawatts AC, 2 megawatts DC? Do we have a?
It is 2 megawatts AC. I think it's 2.34 megawatts DC.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I guess one follow up on that. At the last meeting, we talked about we're working to develop the subscription process, and we've had some discussions on that. We haven't finalized that, so we'll bring that to the board in June to review. Any other questions on the first 2 items? If not, I'll move on.
Can you send us a copy of the lease that we executed, at least to look over?
Yeah.
I trust your opinions, and Levi's, but just to look at, please.
Not a problem. I will send that out to the board.
Would it be okay? I mean, I don't know if we have enough room in call to order, but could we just put the leases in that, down in with the policies and all of that and the FERC stuff?
I think we can. It's Levi, do you remember? Is it 24 pages?
That sounds about right. And it's fine to put the final, but didn't we put like a 98% final one in one of the previous months packets?
You emailed it.
Oh, okay.
It'd be great to just have all this stuff in one area.
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure. I thought we'd shown it to you before.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want it then under Mark's report for this month?
Well, that, or we could have it under board. I mean, I guess that'd be good, but we could also have it under board documents.
Board document, okay.
Either one.
And speaking of contracts, Mark, do you think we're approaching the point where we will be asked next month to approve a contract with regard to high-speed internet?
That is our hope, because we're hoping to get the fiber backbone started here, but we need to have potentially these agreements in place in order to do that, because it is a change in design from the original design that we looked at with ADB, the contractor that was going to construct it.
And would you be able to share the contract prior to next month's meeting so we can review that as well if we're going to be asked to vote on it?
Yes, and there are, I believe, 4 documents that Levi and I are going to go over. 3 of the 4 are 1 or 2 pages, and the contract itself, I believe, is 11. So it's not quite as extensive as some of the other ones that we've looked at.
Fantastic. The final question, is there still another potential partner in the running here that we should discuss in executive session?
We will discuss in executive session. We received a presentation from somebody that the board has talked about over the last year. We thought that they were going to have something to us by the April board meeting. They did not. And yesterday something showed up, and it's not that different from what we had initially seen from them. And when we had talked with them, we told them it was going to need to be different. So, but we'll discuss the specifics in executive session.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. The Winter Park land, I executed the listing agreement after both Levi and I reviewed it. We made a few changes to it. There was a reduction in the compensation to the realtor. There was a reduction in the timeline that they would have the listing. And so we finalized all of those. The property was listed on Monday. And so if you would like to see it, you can go out to Zillow, and under Winter Park land, it is listed there. And you can see the other land for comparison purposes as far as price and stuff like that. There, I was in Walden yesterday and had the chance to have lunch with our line crew and Carl, and mentioned to him that there is one other piece of property, and it's closer to the ski resort, but it is slightly smaller than our lot, and it's listed for $3.7 million. It will be something that they will probably build townhouses and condos, several of them, and then end up selling for a very large price. So I'm guessing that's why they believe that 3.7 is an appropriate number. Also along the Winter Park line is we were contacted by the town manager, and they have requested some information. They are looking at a potential franchise agreement, and they have requested that information regarding the possible revenue that might be generated from a franchise agreement. We have sent that information to them, and now we're just waiting for them to respond back with any other questions that they may have. At this point, we have not provided them with a draft agreement or a template based on the others that we have done, but they are at least in the early stages of a conversation of whether or not Winter Park wants to do a franchise agreement. So I will pause with the 2 Winter Park issues and see if anybody has any questions on either of those. Does not appear, so we will move forward. I sent out an invitation for a microgrid presentation, Zoom presentation on May 27th. This is something that we were contacted several months ago by a CU student, Jess, and I'm probably going to butcher the last name, but Sturshik. And she was performing a master's thesis on microgrid and supply of power to a remote area. We provided her information about the Laramie River, which we have about 60 members in. And she has presented her thesis to the school, and now she's going to do a presentation on the 27th. If you don't have that, let me know, and I'll resend it to board members. But it should be interesting to see what she has come up with based on the information that we were able to provide her.
Mark,
yes.
The email I got said the 26th.
Oh, I will.
It's okay. It's the,
It's the 26th or 27th. So if the one that you got was 26th, then it must be on the 26th. I looked at my calendar this morning. I thought it was on the 27th, but it may be the 26th.
Okay.
and thanks Scott and Mountain Parks for being willing to take this on and provide Jess with whatever she needed. I'm guessing that wasn't necessarily it created some interesting work for you guys, I bet.
The other issue, or the next issue, is our healthcare. We have received over the last month and a half a number of proposals for renewal information for our health insurance, which will happen on July 1st. We will present the numbers specifically to the board in June for review and approval. We're going to discuss them in executive session today. As you know, we went from NRACA, and we have a plan currently that is not on a calendar year. And so that was one of the things that we were trying to achieve. So there are a number of different options. We did not get as many proposals back as we had anticipated, and we'll discuss more in executive session why that is. And then once we get back on a calendar year, we think that going forward, we will have more proposals, which will make it much more competitive. So I will pause to see if anybody has any questions on microgrid or healthcare. Seeing none, move on to my last two items. The Tri-State settlement, I sent out the announcement from Tri-State of the possible settlement of their base rate case with FERC. And all the parties to that, there were a number of interveners. We were not one of them in this particular part. They came up with a settlement, and that includes the FERC staff. And that settlement was filed by Tri-State last week with FERC. FERC actually has to approve the settlement, even though all parties have agreed to it. And that may take somewhere between 60 and 90 days. It's possible that it will go faster than that. However, it's been my experience that fast is not something that goes along with commissions. And the rates that were implemented initially in the base rates were implemented subject to refund. And what that means is FERC authorized you to charge those rates, but if in their final decision, the rate is something different, if it's something less, you have to refund. If it's something more, you can only collect it on a prospective basis. And if the settlement is approved by FERC, it will be retroactive back to March 1st because it does include a rate reduction. And we'll discuss more of that in executive session, specifics on the settlement itself, and then what Mountain Parks may do moving forward. And the last item that I have, and this is Levi, so I will give him the opportunity to chime in as well. As you know, at the beginning of the intervention that Mountain Parks had with the FERC matter, that Levi had reported that he also represents Highline, and Highline was intervening in the matter as well. He indicated that if at some point during the process that our positions differed in any way with Highline's, that it would create a conflict with him and he would not be able to represent either party. And Highline did file comments in favor of policy 125, and Levi notified me that he believes that that creates a conflict for him. So that's all I have. And Levi, if you want to fill in anything else, or if you want to discuss it in executive session, I'll give you the opportunity.
Yeah, I think it'd be best to discuss in executive session.
Okay. And with that, that is the end of my report. If there are any other questions, be happy to address those.
So just one thing, and this may be a something that we get into during executive session, but in the settlement, I noticed that, as Mark said, there's the refund issue of rates, but I think in that settlement also there's the possibility that in the future, if FERC finds that the rate was too low due to some sort of hearing, Tri-State has asked that members, if the rate goes up, that members pay them back. And I think that creates a level of uncertainty for us. But I may have misunderstood what's in that settlement. But at first I was pretty excited. And then when I read that, I was like, wow, this is much more complicated than at face view, first look. So
Yeah, and a general comment on that, there is a part of the settlement that requires Tri-State to file a rate case in, I believe it's 2023. And so what they will do is, if the settlement is approved, there are things that will happen in 21, 22, and then in 23, they would file a rate case. It is possible, obviously, we don't know what the future holds, that rate case may come in with an amount that is different than what the rate will be at that time. So that is obviously something that we'll discuss more in executive session and how that may affect us. Any other questions before we move on to discussion items?
You got your safety report in there, Mark.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm not used to that. You have the safety report from Brian. And let's see, hold on just a second here. Open this one up. I've got too many screens. I got 4 screens going here. We had 2 near misses or minor incidents. The one, somebody was pulling into a garage. They did not check beforehand, and the garage was slightly lower than the top of the vehicle because there were some lights on top of the vehicle. There was no significant damage. We basically just reattached the lights, and then there was a near miss with one of our crews. They were replacing wire, and they had put the wire over the bucket. It was something that they were going to drop to the ground, but they were waiting until they had completed some additional work. It slipped off of the bucket, and it did not drop all the way to the ground, but it could have been, if there were obviously individuals on the ground, somebody could have been hurt. Those are the 2 near misses or incidents. There's some information on some additional training that is going to be done and some that has been completed at this point. So I'll take any questions that you may have on the safety report. Seeing none, then we'll need a motion to accept the safety report. It looks like Justin, and a second with Dick.
Motion and a second. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, there you have it, Mark.
Okay, so moving into the action items. The first item is the audit report that was presented by the auditor at last month's meeting. Since it did not make the agenda last month, the board just needs to ratify their decision related to accepting the audit report.
Move to ratify the audit report.
Thanks, Kristen. We have a motion by Kristen and a second by Liz. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Okay, our next item is policy E1, safety and job training. You have a copy of the policy there. Levi has reviewed the policy and did not have any suggested changes. Staff didn't have any changes either. So if the board has any questions related to the policy, we can take those.
Yeah, I think that in G, let's see, it is under B2G. I wasn't sure if the safety manager was directly responsible to the ops manager or the GM? I thought you guys had, that's up to you how you organize it, but I thought we'd moved it to the GM, and now I'm like, well, this policy says something else. So I wasn't.
We did. You are correct. It was moved to our safety coordinator. Brian reports to me. So we will make that change.
Yeah, and then I had another question on responsibilities, 3B. I think I sort of get what this, so it says the general manager, ops manager, or safety coordinator should make all reports as required by this policy and other entities having jurisdiction and cause to be carried out a well-rounded safety and job training program in accordance with this policy. And I'm like, well-rounded. I think what you mean is like company-wide or community-wide, but I'm also like, I want it to be effective. I want it to be one that performs too. And so I wasn't really sure that well-rounded, and I'm just throwing that out for discussion, is do we want a well-rounded policy, or do we want something that has a little more, heft to it, while expressing that we can't just focus on, it's not all about linemen or driving the vehicles correctly, but it's also about, customer service, not having a unsecured copier up high that's going to fall down and crush them, or, wildfire. And, there's so many things. So I get that it's broad, but I'm kind of like, I want it to be effective.
And I don't have a problem changing it to effective. It is well-rounded, I think, and part of that is, you're right, that it's not just a focus on safety of the linemen. Obviously, that's a primary focus of ours because theirs is a more dangerous job. But we do have ergonomic is within the safety program. We have hazardous chemicals training. We also have the drug and alcohol testing and reasonable suspicion, that type of thing. So it does affect all of the employees, but I think that it would be a good change to make put effective in there. I mean, obviously,
well-rounded and effective.
Yeah, I mean, having a program is one thing, and it can be well-rounded, but if it's not effective, then it doesn't really do us much good. And that's one of the things that we are focusing on. And that Brian has been looking at a number of other things that feed into the safety policy. I think we've done more safety training on things this year so far than we did last year. Now, obviously, some of that was COVID, but we've done ATV training for staff and a number of other things. And he's got some other things that are coming up. Cold weather training we did for staff. And so I think effective, maybe we could say an effective, well-rounded safety and job training program.
Thank you. That's all I have on that.
Question is avoiding.
Sorry, Kristen, just before we move past what Liz wanted to do, what section was that? I just want to make sure I have my notes right.
3B.
3B, okay. Sorry, Kristen, go ahead.
Where in the safety procedures of mountain parks would identification and prevention of safety hazards related to equipment failures appear? So for example, if there were a faulty piece of equipment that started a fire, would we get notification of that in the safety report?
Well, you would, as the board, much like we do with outages, you would get notification when it happens. Yes, it would also be in the safety report, but you'd get notification when it happens. For instance, if windstorm, line falls, starts a fire, you would be notified of that as the board prior to. I mean, we're not going to wait till the next board meeting to let you know.
Thank you.
You're making Levi squirm.
Yeah, and so here in open session, I would just say that I would want to be involved on how, when, and where that was communicated to the board in that particular type of situation for legal reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, there's a difference, like, this is the policy, and under the policy, you guys set up procedures based on kind of the guidance of the policy. And so I don't expect, I expect the policy to sort of set the parameters and the
Yeah.
goals.
And Kristen, the reason for that is the situation you mentioned just would bring the prospective litigation into issue. And so we always want to protect communications related to and concerning potential claims against mountain parks. So you would get, all I'm saying is, so you would get this communicated to you. How and under, and well, just exactly how.
I'm more interested in the prevention, Levi. Hopefully we do that well, and then we never have that communicated at all.
Exactly.
And we would, with this, we would obviously discuss it with Levi, but then we would have the requirement to notify our insurance carrier in a timely manner. You don't necessarily have to know all of the specifics. You just have to tell them that there's a potential.
Anybody have anything else for that policy? Levi, can you make those changes if we accept it today, or?
So yeah, Michelle, do you have all those changes? So we will get a motion to approve with those revisions, and then you'll have that policy. Is everybody else getting that echo?
So it would be switch from operations manager to the GM being in charge, and then also adding effective. So an effective and well-rounded safety and job training program. Those are the two that were suggested.
So I would move to approve.
Well, and before you move, Liz, remember that as you move to approve, we will also say whether or not this will be a policy that is public.
Yeah, and I'm going to say it's going to be public.
Okay.
I move to approve policy E1 with the following amendments. Under 2BG, to coordinate the cooperative safety program and be directly responsible to the general manager, strike operations manager. And under 3, B, that add the word effective prior to well-rounded. And that the policy
Thanks, Liz.
is public.
We have a second. A second by Kristen. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Okay,
E2.
Moving on to policy E2, security of personal health information. Levi has reviewed this, did not have any changes to it. Be open to questions from the board. If they are specific enough, we may need to discuss them in executive session. This is basically our requirements under HIPAA, the federal legislation that requires us to keep employee health information private.
Guys feel like this policy is working for you?
We do, and obviously when we became partially self-funded, we have had to expand a number of the things that we do and how we do them to ensure that we comply with HIPAA. Joe has been helpful in that because a lot of the stuff is electronic. We have done some education with employees about what they send in an email, because even though it's my information and I send it to Joe, that's still something that is potentially a problem for us as mountain parks if they are sending it on our system. So it has worked thus far. I'm not saying that we're done because I'm guessing that there will be ever changing requirements in this, and we'll continue to monitor what we need to do to stay compliant.
Move to approve the policy and make it public.
Thanks, Liz. We got a motion by Liz and a second by Mark. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Okay, the next item is related to the electric transit buses, which Ivy had discussed earlier. There is a there's information to the board. And I believe the next item as well under D, the Community Betterment Fund request. The request is actually the second item. The first item under D is some information related to costs and other stuff. So I will open it up for the board to ask questions if you have them, and then discussion related to this request.
The only scenario I have is I want to make sure if we are going to help them with the buses, that this is something that covers as much of our territory as possible. You know, normally these buses run mostly down the east end of our territory. And I just want to make sure that if we're going to fund this, that this covers as much as possible. And I know Carl likes to pursue this with respect to Jackson County. I realize they're not going to go up there, but I want to make sure that we're getting the most out of this if we're going to help fund the project.
Okay, and just for clarification purposes, so people know, Ivy is still on the Zoom. So if there are specific questions related to it, she can respond to those. But we can. I think she was going to provide us with some information related to routes and coverages that the board will receive at some point here in the near future. Kristen.
I did a little back of the envelope math here, and I invite you, Mark, to correct me, but I'm really excited, for one, about being able to demonstrate bidirectional charger capability. I was really bummed when East Grand didn't get that funding, because they would have had that opportunity to test that out with us. And you know, looking at what other co-ops around Colorado have had to pay in order to develop those partnerships and get that done, it was significantly more than the request that Winter Park is making here. And just a quick back of the envelope, you know, if we can even shave 200 kilowatt hours, or not kilowatt hours, 200 kilowatts off of our monthly peak, which those size batteries, who knows, it may be possible. We're looking at like a 2-year payback of that investment, and then a possible net positive for the co-op going forward. So I'd love to look at those numbers and that math a little bit more. So I just invite the board to consider the opportunity here to try that out.
And we will work with Ivy to look at that. I know that it is a little more challenging with a transit bus to do vehicle to grid than it is with a school bus, because a school bus basically runs twice a day and the rest of the time it sits there. With transit, it can be done. I mean, it's being done other places. And so I think that there is an opportunity, and especially as the fleet grows, it would be an opportunity to do vehicle to grid. But we will work with Ivy to get some of those numbers in the information that we provide to the board.
I think that's an opportunity. I think just the fact, I mean, we'll also be selling electricity to them that they wouldn't normally buy. So that's a benefit to all our members as well, even if the bus doesn't go to the top of Muddy Pass currently. Other comment I would make is when I look at the West Grand project, by spending $60,000 of the fund money, we got in, 4 times that in grant money. And this is kind of the same thing, would be 100,000 into it for a, $4.3 million project. If that 100,000 can bring in that 3.7 million, I think that's money well spent, especially given the opportunity to pilot the B2G and also just sell more electricity and help clean up that fleet. So I'm in support of this. I think we, Carl, I think we all have concerns about having this money be spent broadly across our membership, like Dick mentioned, like in our whole service territory. But I think it's going to be hard to find projects that meet the needs of our whole territory. And we have to think about, well, how are we going to help Jack? What are the projects that really resonate in Jackson? What's really going to resonate in Kremling? What's going to, and in that, what do they need? What will help them? But also, does it fit within our strategic plans? And I think this project does. So that's my take. I would.
Okay, Carl, did you have something?
Yes, Mark, I was just curious we have an established rate for charging, correct?
We have an established rate for electric chargers. So the owner of an electric vehicle charger is charged rate by us. We do not establish the rate that they charge to the public.
I understand that, but since this is a government entity or a transit authority, is there a difference in a rate for them than a homeowner or a member that has a charger in their garage?
Yes, the city, especially with the new transit facility that they will build, is going to be on a large power rate. And so the large power rate would cover the power that was used in these chargers. And so but it would be different than a residential rate. A residential rate is different. And then of course we have the time of use rate that's available to residential members as well, that is not available to large power users.
And Winter Park is aware of that scenario?
Yes, I mean, that's the rate that they're currently on. So they know how they would be charged for the electricity that they use. Now, there is a possibility that Mountain Parks could develop another rate for the charging of these buses if they do it off peak. If they were charging them from say 10 o'clock at night until 6 in the morning. And so that's a possibility, but at this juncture, if they were charging them, they'd be charging them based on the large power rate that they are currently on.
Okay. One other comment is franchise agreements are a benefit to Mountain Parks, correct?
The franchise agreement does benefit us in the work that we do, typically within the city limits of the town. It makes it easier for us to do some of the work that we need to do. I mean, if you look at it, that benefits us financially because we are able to do projects in a more expeditious manner. And then the benefit to the city is the fee that they charge and that we collect and remit to them.
Is it possible to tie this contribution, if it's so approved, to pushing Winter Park to have that franchise agreement or require them to?
I think that based on our conversations with the town manager, we're not going to need it to push the agreement. I think that the agreement for the franchise agreement for the city is of a benefit to them. It provides an additional source of revenue for the city, and that's revenue that they can use to do things that they want to accomplish that they might not be able to do otherwise. So I don't think that there's a need to tie the two. I think they are moving forward now with the franchise agreement. One of the challenges that they have always had was with the largest power user within their area. And that has been a challenge for the franchise agreement, but I believe that they are having conversations to work that out.
Okay, thank you.
This could be tied though to receipt of the state money, correct?
Receipt of state money, are you talking about the
like if they don't get the grant for the buses, they don't get the grant from us, right?
Oh, yes, and I think that would be something that the board should do, is that this is contingent upon them getting the grant, because and I believe that at least some of the grants are federal, and so if they don't get the grant, then yes, our money wouldn't flow through to the city. And I see that Ivy has come off of mute, so she may have a comment on that.
Yes, Mark, I was completely going to echo that. I wouldn't ask that the board contribute unless we are fully awarded for these buses. And if we have to, reapply, we might come back to you guys. And if you guys are still supportive, then, we'll ask you all again. But certainly I appreciate your guys' support and partnership in these if we are awarded. So.
I move that we support the Winter Park electric transit project for $100,000 contingent upon Winter Park being successful in obtaining federal and state grant money for the program as presented.
Did a motion by Liz, and Justin, was that a second by you, or?
No, I had some discussion when it's time for that.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Kristen. All right, further discussion, Justin.
I guess I still hesitate to move too far away from our educational fund. I mean, this was originally established for that purpose, and we're just broadening the scope for, what we're using these funds for. And second, I guess, are we sure that we can give money to a government body within this fund?
Yeah, we do. I mean, the money that we gave to the school district was a government body. We have, with COVID, we provided money for the filters and stuff like that for the school districts. And so I don't see that as an issue. I would say that although it is titled the Education Fund, there is a component within the fund that is for economic development as well. And I think this would fall under the economic development portion of the fund.
If I can just make an argument too, I mean, this fund is made of contributions from unclaimed capital credits from our members, a large portion of which come from this particular area of our community. And, it's really up to those members of the community represented by the government of Winter Park and the partners in this to decide what the community's priorities are. And that's why they're coming to us. So, just given that such a large portion of this fund consists of contributions from these members, I think we should be supporting it.
Liz, something that wasn't in your motion that and Kristen had brought it up is the bilateral charging. That's important to me as well. And I don't feel like I have the particulars on this equipment right now, to maybe make that decision. I'm wondering if, that's something we can get here shortly before I don't know how time sensitive this decision is, but.
Ivy, is this, when do the grants have to be submitted with a committed matching amount?
So we actually submitted the grant application in March. And so we won't hear back till September. So I've got till September to get you guys all of the spec information. I sent you the bus specs, Mark, while sitting on this call. So that's able to be sent out to you guys. I'm happy to get more information on the B2G systems and equipment and all of that information. So that is something that I'm happy to get to you guys so you guys can see, you know, how exactly this will work with our charging system. Something to keep in mind, we do have till 2035 is our goal to completely electrify the fleet. We use the majority of our buses in the winter. So all summer, the majority of our buses are sitting idle. Those chargers aren't being used and the batteries aren't being used. So that would be definitely a huge benefit to you guys, Mountain Parks Electric, to test that B2G if that's something we want to move forward with and kind of study and get more, you know, education and knowledge and see how it actually works for us. So, but yes, so we did let the FTA and state know that we were approaching you guys for this $100,000 and it was completely contingent. So they know that we have asked this of you guys in Mountain Parks Electric, but it is not for certain until we have the grant awarded. So,
Jeff, would you like to? You want me to either include that in the motion, or do you guys want to table this? I mean, I'm
include it in the motion, but don't we have to vote this one already because it's on the floor?
But
We do.
can I amend it? If I move to amend it, can we amend it, Levi?
If you move to amend it, you would vote on the amendment and then you would vote on the original motion after you voted on the amendment.
Okay, so I would like to amend my motion to include, I think, contingent upon receiving the grant. Also, that the buses have, that Winter Park agrees to work with Mountain Parks Electric on vehicle to grid applications.
Okay, thanks, Liz. We have a motion by Liz and a second by Dick. Any further discussion on that? Carl, did you have anything?
No, I don't have anything at this point. I'm not sure the amendment to the motion is adequate. In my mind, I would rather table this down the road since we have to September to come up with the money. In that time frame, I believe that we can answer the question that you just asked and really analyze what the use of these batteries might be in a two-way connection. You know, I think Ivy pointed out that these buses run more so than the school bus, and so in my mind, I'd rather table the whole motion until a later date.
I'd rather vote on it today.
Any further discussion?
It seems like in the summer we could take advantage of that. I mean, I would feel our peak is probably falling right when their peak time is during the winter, though. I mean, that's the busy time for picking people up from transporting people around Winter Park too, though. But in the summer, seems like it'd be a great option.
Mark, did you have something?
Yeah, and to Mark, I questioned him. I like Justin's comment because this is supposed to be out of the educational funds that we're okay for economic development. On that, Mark, you're okay with that?
Me, yes.
Yes. Does that fit the parameters of using our educational funds for economic development? Back to Justin's first comment and question on discussion.
Well, and I think, and I will let Levi weigh in if he would like to as well. The education fund and the board's ability to use the funds is fairly broad. And within the economic development, one of the things has been mentioned in the discussion earlier, as well as the recent discussion, is that this is a possibility of generating significant electric sales for mountain parks. And those electric sales benefit all of our members, obviously. I believe, and I don't know this for certain, we'd have to get this number, but total charging of the buses, when the fleet is there, it could be up to 3 megawatts. And so that's a significant amount of additional electric sales that we would have. And so I think that does provide some economic development, and then also assist Mountain Parks and its members as well through additional sales that they wouldn't otherwise see.
Okay, just want to clarify. I think it's a great project. Just make sure we're okay using out of the educational funds that we're on the right place. So I think it's a good.
We might want to think about changing the educational fund title at some point.
I agree.
Yeah.
Sensitive to what Justin's concern, and I thought about that too when this came in, like how much are we going to broaden that? But currently we use those funds to fund the Jackson Enterprise project and the Grand Enterprise, and that's business development. And we do that, so far we've done that on, I don't know how many years, quite a few years now. And this is a one-time, to me, this is a one-time expense, and it probably is similar to the 5 years we've spent on those programs. And I kind of trying to figure out the benefit of both, like weighing the benefits of those programs. And so, yeah, but I'm sensitive to that too, Justin. And I feel like, because and I know that previous boards, Jeff and Dick have probably been on these boards. They've gone through iterations of trying to really nail down the priorities of that fund and how the grant cycles are run and and then it becomes so complex that the fund never gets used. But I'm sensitive to putting some guardrails on there, Justin.
If I can address the reason we picked education going way back was that it was the idea that was brought to the board. Our main objective for this was so that the state doesn't get the money. And at the time we started this, education was something that was at the forefront, and the fund was so much smaller than it is today. I mean, we were putting into the fund 50, 75,000, maybe 100,000 a year. Now we're looking at putting in $200,000-$300,000 a year. And I realized a number of years ago, we decided that with the fund that large, we could expand the utilization. And I know Levi looked at whether or not it was okay to do that. And the board at that time decided that it was appropriate. So that's the history. As far as how much we want to develop or put into the community versus education, I think that's up to the board. And like Liz just said, this is a one-time item. And if there's not a real objection and there's a lot of funding, I don't seem to think there's a problem. So that's just a little bit of history of how this started.
I'm in support for it, and I do feel it's an electric use and a good way for looking at grid, tying them back into the grid also, and it benefits a large portion of our membership. I just don't want to get into complete community development with this fund. So I guess a year and a half ago, one of the commissioners asked me when they were looking at the new sheriff's department or jail, if it'd be something Mountain Parks could partner in. And I said, I don't think that's really in our realm, but I think we need to stay the course a little bit on electric. I don't know. Anyways, you see what I'm saying?
Understandable.
Anybody got anything else? Okay.
Yeah,
All
real
those
quick. So I want to understand what the amendment,
Yeah.
What Kristen, or it was Liz, right? That
Liz.
stated
Yep.
the amendment. What, can you say the amendment again?
Yeah, the amendment was contingent upon federal and state grant funding, award of federal.
Okay, so I understood the original motion to have that part in there.
And then add after that, and working with mountain parks on grid, or vehicle to grid applications.
Okay, so the amendment is just to add
Right.
requiring Town of Winter Park to work with Mountain Parks Electric in vehicle to grid applications.
And that would allow the staff a broader ability to work with Winter Park than specifying specific vehicle capabilities that I don't know what they are right now. But, you know, it gives our staff the ability to do what they need to do to make that happen. That was my intent.
Sure.
That.
So Michelle, you got that. It's just the amendment is just the vehicle to grid portion. Okay.
Okay, all those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Well,
And we need to vote on the,
yeah, that's the amendment. Now you need to vote on the original motion as amended.
okay. We need to vote on the original motion as amended. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries.
So Michelle, in that second motion, make sure it says as the original motion as amended.
Okay, moving on. Last month we discussed the CoBank grant that they had approved. It was, well, at that point we didn't know whether or not it would be approved. It has been approved for $10,000 for the Mountain Family Center for the TOACH program. That's the program that provides food for the kids to take home for the weekend. And it operates in both Grand and Jackson counties. The program requires that that we match the money that they gave. And so that would be a $10,000 match. And I believe we discussed it last month, but this was something that we weren't certain of. So if the board is so inclined, we would need to have a motion to match the CoBank grant of $10,000 for the Mountain Family Center TOACH program.
And this is primarily for school kids, right?
It's all school kids, and it's within all the major school districts within our service territory. So, and it's not just at the high schools or the grade schools. It's all. And one of the things that they did do during the pandemic, because obviously it's difficult to have the bags there for the kids to take home at school because the kids aren't in school, is they developed a mobile pantry so they could take the bags to where the kids were to have them able to pick them up.
I'll move.
A motion. Thanks, Justin. By Justin, a second by Liz. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Okay, the next is a request from the Grand Lake Fire District. Well, actually, there's several of them that are listed there, and it has to do with submersible vehicles for rescue purposes or recovery purposes. You have a copy of it there within your packets, and what they are asking for, and it's a little too small, I can't actually read it, is generators to help run these devices when they are out at the lakes and doing the search and rescue. And they have asked Mountain Parks for assistance in providing that power supply. And the cost of the generators are between $1,400 and $1,500 per unit, and they would need 2 of them.
I think this is a really worthwhile cause. I can attest to everything he's got in here. When I was an investigator 1 year, I had 6 water drownings, and that included an 18-year-old kid that went into Wolford that took over a month to find because we didn't have the technology to locate him. So it's a good opportunity help out here, I believe.
Move to approve.
Thanks, Kristen. A motion by Kristen, second by Dick. Any further discussion?
Is this, I just to clarify for staff, is this out of general funds?
We can either do it out of general funds or out of the education fund, either way. I think the request was to the education fund, but if need be, we can find the money within the general fund.
Yeah, and I wasn't indicating it should be. I just wanted to, it wasn't articulated, so I just wanted to make sure everybody's on the same page.
So I guess we could go back to the maker of the motion and ask Kristen her intent for where the funds would come
From the Education and Community and Development Fund.
And then Dick as the second, are you good? He's good with that. Okay, so there you have your motion.
Okay, we had a motion and a second. Anything else from anybody? Further discussion?
Yeah, Jeff.
Go ahead, Carl. Yeah.
Just discussion. Why wasn't the North Park or fire district notified of this? And is it usable in our whole territory or just in Grand County?
The Carl, the request came from the group that is, I think it's the Committee of the Safety Groups, and it's East Grand, Grand Lake, Hot Sulphur, Partial, Kremlin. I don't know that the North Park participates in that, but I would say that if they had a rescue that they were trying to do, that it would be something that would be through interagency cooperation that they would be able to provide to them to in support of that rescue or recovery.
Yeah, Carl.
Is that speculation on your part, Mark, or is that affirmative?
I have not talked with North Park or Grand. However, I do know, and Jeff may, with his law enforcement background, may be able to speak specifically to it. But I do know that the counties and the fire districts and sheriff services do have interagency agreements to cooperate on stuff. And if there is equipment that one has that could be utilized by somebody else, that it is generally available for the other district or county. But Jeff, you have more experience with this. Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really state in their letter, Mark. I mean, it just calls out county, but you know, mutual aid comes in from all around the state, typically. So, I mean, I don't see why not, that they would not go up there if need be. But maybe that's something that we can ask them that.
Well, Carl, it seems like, it seems like in the past when we've had issues in Grand County and Wolford and like Granby, our sheriffs and emergency departments have asked Summit County to loan their remote operating vehicle to us to use over here, and that's happened. But given the use of the lakes now, more equipment is necessary. Have you heard any conversations about the need for something like this up in Jackson County? Is there any effort to reach out to other entities with this kind of equipment and create those arrangements? I mean, some of the onus is on, it's a team effort. I'm guessing they're all talking, but we may not hear about it. But if they aren't all talking, if we could provide that little bump to get them talking, that'd be great.
Well, I don't, can't speculate on the need for it. I mean, we have lakes up here also, and we've had drownings in the past. Whether it would need that kind of vehicle to recover, I don't have any idea, but I just would like assurance that there is some agreement, and everybody seems to be speculating that we will all share, but if Mountain Parks is going to contribute to this, which I have no objection to, that we be assured that it's used all over or has the ability to be used in all our territory.
Jeff, just to clarify, this was the East Grand Fire District specifically for generators to power those remote recovery vehicles. It was the East Grand Fire. Am I hearing that right?
It's the East Grand, Grand Lake, Hot Sulphur Partial, and Kremling fire districts, as well as the Grand County Sheriff's Office, Grand County EMS.
Okay, so it's the collective. Okay, thank you.
Colorado Parks and Wildlife, Northern Water, and maybe some other nonprofits are collaborating in it. So
yeah, and I would say, Carl, too, like, if they have these assets close in Grand County, I mean, that's a benefit to Jackson County as well. I mean, I've never seen, if they get a phone call, no, we're not going to come unless, those things are being used at that time. But just to have them, that much closer to you is a benefit.
Oh, I totally agree with you, Jeff. I just want some assurance that will happen.
Well, and Carl, what we can do is, I know Todd, and I know Don knows him as well because he's been working with him. When we communicate the support of the board, we can make clear to them that the board's desire is that these assets be available to North Park should they have a need for them.
Sounds good.
Hey, anyone from North Park listening, know you have a fierce advocate on your side in Carl Trick.
I guess in the future, would this be something, Mark, that would just fall under your general discretion funds?
Probably not my general discretion because that's more charitable in nature or community support for events and stuff like that. That's a small enough budget item that it would be difficult to do something like this out of it, because that would, let's say for the two, if they are $1,500 a piece, that's $3,000. That would be a fifth of the budget.
I hear you, Justin. I think I would be interested in thinking about future, and again, I've called them guardrails for this fund, so that we're not getting, $5,000, $3,000 requests every month, because I could see where that would go. I mean, I can see where this is kind of going. I think this is a worthwhile request, and I support it. But going forward, we need to be a little more, anyway.
And maybe we could add that to a future board meeting discussion, is like how to divvy up education fund, and maybe we can discuss in the future.
Okay, so we do have a motion on the table, correct? And
yes,
your Mark or Don's going to speak with Todd about the use of those assets. So all those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Okay, the next item is policy E5. Last month in our executive session discussion, there was a considerable amount of discussion related to an item that is affected by this policy. And Levi rewrote policy E5 based on that discussion. And so you have a copy of it. It's obviously not very large, basically one paragraph, but you have a copy of it in your board packet. And so we will open it up for discussion to the board.
Looks like exactly what we discussed.
Move to approve it.
Thanks, Liz. Got a motion by Liz and a second by
Liz, would that have it public as well?
Yeah.
and a second by Justin. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries. Moving along.
Okay, the last two items have to do with, the first is the CFC annual meeting. They are asking us to name a voting delegate for the 52nd annual meeting, which will be held June 14th in San Antonio. I believe that there's also a virtual option on that as well. So we need to identify a delegate for that. And I would assume that normally they want an alternate as well.
Anybody going to that? I'm surprised they're even having it that early, but
Yeah.
Well, it's in Texas.
that's true.
I was the person last year who did this, and I did listen in to they had a phone call for the meeting, and they changed their bylaws so that they could meet remotely and decide things remotely. And so I'm familiar with it. I'd be happy to be the delegate again. And I'm not sure about the virtual meeting. It does seem like they have some speakers. I haven't looked to see if there's a cost to it, but there is just a ballot attached to this that whoever the delegate is should sign it, and we should send it in, because we do want to make sure that their minutes as presented are passed, so they can do business the way they would like. Yeah.
And we can vote virtually in that?
Well, actually, Liz brings up a good point. If you look at the bottom of the item, it says voting is permitted by mail or on site.
Yeah.
And so since we have the ballot, if you designate the delegate, then the delegate could vote the ballot and we could mail it.
Okay. Liz, are you going to attend that virtually or?
Well, definitely. Well, first of all, we'll figure out the voting part. I will try to attend virtually if there's not a big cost to it. If there's a big cost to it, then I think we should think about whether, I'll discuss with you whether or not it's
okay.
Do
we have so if everybody's good with having Liz as the delegate, looks like we're going to need an alternate as well. Does anybody have any interest in case Liz can't do it? Anyone? Dick? Okay. We probably do need a motion to accept Liz and Dick as the delegate and alternate.
Yes.
So moved.
Thanks, Kristen. A second by Justin. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, thank you.
Okay, our last discussion item has to do with the National Cooperative Services Corporation, which is, I believe, affiliated with CFC. And because I think that because they are having their 40th annual meeting, and it also happens to be on June 14th in San Antonio, Texas. And so they are asking us to identify a delegate for that as well.
Liz and Dick.
Yeah.
Kristen, did you make that motion again?
So moved.
Thank you. We have a motion by Kristen and a second by Justin. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, thanks. Hey, Mark, what about a break?
I was going to suggest like a 5 or 10 minute break before we get into the reports.
No, let's go 10. Be back at 9:45. That work for everybody?
And Mark or Michelle, could you send that CFC thing to my personal email, and that way I can print up that sheet and sign it and get it back to you?
Well, actually, if you want, since I know where you live and I drive past your house, I will just drop it by your house.
Okay, perfect. That sounds good.
All right, it's 9:46. Scott, are you ready to go?
Yeah, I am.
I think you don't have 3 of your board members unless their cameras just aren't turned on. Oh, okay, Justin.
Well, then they're late.
Okay, well then in that case, we can move on with Scott.
All right, go for it, Scott.
Okay, you all have my report. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, Scott, I have a question, just a little more of an update on your number 3 under the strategic plan. Can you give a little more update on where we are with that and what you're looking at?
Well, we've talked about, I mean, it's kind of 2 topics all in one. So we've had some discussion about reliability. Don has instituted a reliability team, which me and several members of my department are participating. We look at several things to do with that. From the engineering side, we look at coordination of protective devices, make sure everything operates properly, make sure we don't have outages that are avoidable in the way of devices not operating correctly. We've also looked at changing some of the devices, particularly fuses that have only one operation, to other devices which would have more than one operation to clear temporary problems on the system. On the topic of load control, we've had some discussions regarding, you guys done the hot water heater program, the pilot program in the past, electric heat pump pilot programs in the past, and need to dig in a little bit deeper on some of those programs and see what the success of those. ETS obviously is another load control program. And so I need to have individual meetings with managers, as I said in my report, in order to come up with some recommendations beyond what we've got currently.
How about in outage situation as what possibly could have happened this winter? What's the conversation there?
As far as this winter, in regards to what outage?
Well, if we get curtailed as far as the load control situation for members that might have generators or whatever, I think at one point in time you were going to look into that or update it. Maybe I'm wrong in that respect, but
no, we have talked about that, and there are members that do have generators. Really, it's more of a complex situation than that. And so depending on when we have a call for curtailment, what the time frame is for when we have to curtail that load and how much load we have to curtail. The majority of our membership with loads that have backup generators are fairly small loads. And so, I mean, you're talking about fire stations, and you're talking about maybe some commercial facilities, maybe some hospitals. But if you take all of those loads and add them together, what is the possibility that their current load that they can serve with a generator is going to add up to, in the case of, I believe it was 2 megawatts that was requested. And you're not going to be able to do that within a half-hour type time frame that Tri-State is requesting. You're talking about trying to chase down people, have them turn on generators. So And that type of situation is completely different. Load control to shave peaks is a whole lot easier. When we're talking about a emergency request from your G&T to curtail load, obviously we would like to be able to do that as quickly as possible. And the use of customer generators and the generators that customers have will not generate onto our system. And they are designed to isolate their load from the system. So it really depends on the load that they have at the time and how much we can curtail.
So it really, really the bottom line is when Tri-State asks for this information or what we can do, we essentially, what I'm hearing from you is we really can't do a hell of a lot. Is that right?
Well, we certainly can, but what we would have to do is de-energize portions of the system on a rotating basis in order to give Tri-State what they want.
Hey, Carl, have any experts ever been called into the Tri-State board to talk about demand response programs?
Not to my knowledge.
You might want to suggest that.
And that's a good point. They may have talked to staff, but not to the board.
Yeah, I think they owe it to you to give you guys like a basic level set on what major utilities do for demand response.
Yeah, and I do know that that Dwayne has talked about the fact that staff is reviewing their demand response policy and trying to beef it up because I think Dwayne recognized that it's not necessarily where it needs to be in an event like happened on February 14th. So I think that that is something that they're working on, and I would expect that as staff moves forward with that they will discuss it with the board to get the board's direction.
This brings up, to me, the problem with policy 115, which really, in some ways, depending on how you read the policy, could discourage co-ops from being able to own or control devices that could shed load quickly, even though this is complicated, and I know we're not even close to getting there, Scott, but just that policy discourages us from even attempting that. And with the settlement, it looks like that policy wouldn't necessarily be changed or challenged until after 2023. And, you know, it puts us in a tough place if we have to pay what policy 115 asks us to pay to develop these resources. And then have Tri-State say, oh my God, you have to shed. And we will have had to pay a whole bunch of money to be able to shed load. The policy doesn't encourage a flexible setup to be able to meet Tri-State's needs or what.
No, it discourages it. It doesn't just not encourage it. It literally penalizes it.
And based on what the summers are looking like, we have to think about this for sure. And I know staff's working on it. But that conversation with Tri-State, they've always encouraged us to be completely reliant on them being able to meet our needs, even though that contract says they can curtail. And that puts us in a bad spot.
Yeah, one question for Scott. My understanding from when I was building the house here is that mountain parks used to stock electric water heaters. One, do we still do that? And two, could we or should we consider stocking water heaters that have a demand response capability built in so that we're more situated to be able to do that?
Well, it's more of a question for Rob because we did stock the water heaters and Rob was managing that program. And we had some warranty problems with the water heaters. And I believe that it was the supplier had gone to a different manufacturer for the water heater or had gotten bought out and the quality had gone down. Am I covering that right, Rob?
That's what happened. And then we had water heater failures and unhappy members. And so we adopted kind of the policy that many utilities do, where we realized a better role for Mountain Parks is to write the rebate and leave it up to the customer or consumer to go secure their water heater, and us to provide the rebate. And then if they had any problems with their water heater, they could work that out with the manufacturer.
One thing that the Energy Department and Energy Star program are finding is that it's more effective to do rebates that are midstream than to rebates to end use customers, although end use rebates can be popular. Like if you want to get a local plumber to stock a water heater that is demand response capable, that means they'd have to pay a couple $100 extra bucks, and they may be inclined to stock the cheapest thing and have that on the truck, you know, if someone's water heater goes out. By doing an incentive program that incentivizes the distributor, in this case, that would be like the plumber, to stock the better units, the ones that are more compatible with what we want, that tends to see much higher uptake rates in other service territories. So just something to consider in incentive design. I'll send you a link on it.
Scott, this is Carl again. Going back to curtailment, if it would come, how does Mountain Parks, if we had to have a rolling brownout in our territory, and I assume that we would control that, is there a plan or a policy to who goes out first and how that is handled in our territory at all?
Well, there's not a plan yet, but Don and I have discussed that. And I think it's something that is part of our reliability team, and part of Don and I working together is something we're going to develop.
And Carl, that was an add-on to, we started with trying to identify customers that had generator capability. Part of that going forward is, could we develop a rate that was an interruptible rate that would incentivize users to have a generator that would offset their load, that would be somewhat either controllable by us, or that would be easy for us to, we give them notice and then we basically discontinue service to them for a period of time. Now, having worked with those rates in the past, it's not something that, you know, like every week you can shut them off. There's a limit to the number of times that you can utilize that. And it's something that is done in a more strategic manner. But I think that there are a number of things that staff are working on in order to make sure that we're in the best position possible should a curtailment be called upon, and so not to overburden one segment of our member base. And so that's the rolling blackout piece, and who would go first and who would, you know, how we would proceed. That's something that we're working on, and that is somewhat system limitation too, is we have to figure out if there are current system limitations, how do we eliminate those to make it easier to you know, put that plan in place should we need to.
Mark, is there a timeline on completion of this plan, or is it a priority, or just something we're thinking about, or?
It's a priority, and that's why we have developed the reliability group to address some of those issues, because obviously we don't know when the next time that there would be a curtailment called for. It would most likely be in the winter, because that's when at least our demand is highest. And so we are moving forward to try and have something in place by the end of the year. Now, will it be a extremely detailed and address every issue? It might not be, but we would have in place how we're going to deal with these situations as they come up.
Hey, Mark.
Thank you.
If I could just interject real quickly, I'm just thinking of our members maybe watching this on YouTube. Since I've been here in 2004, to my knowledge, we've not had a rolling brownout situation with our members. And so we might want to just say something to assure them, you know, this is just something we're planning for in an extreme emergency, but not something that we anticipate happening soon, or something that's happened at least since 2004.
Right, and I think that it falls within the old adage that you plan for the worst and hope for the best, that you have in place things that can deal with these extremely infrequent events, but that you are prepared for them should they come up, even though you know that it's highly unlikely that you will ever see something like that.
You know, also for the benefit of members, many of whom may also have other homes elsewhere or have worked with other utilities before, it's not uncommon for utilities to voluntarily enroll people in a system, or companies in a system, that compensates them if they do have their power reduced, or if they agree to reduce power at a certain period of time, usually no more than once a year. So like, you know, that's very common. I personally was enrolled in one of these systems that simply turned down my air conditioner if there was a grid emergency. So it need not be an actual outage or brownout.
No, and Kristen's right. And I think part of the challenge for us too is connectivity for those load control devices in homes. Is that in areas within our service territory, the connectivity to be able to do that is much less available than it needs to be. And so that is obviously something that we're continuing to work on as well.
And I would just say other utilities around the world have been super creative in this. After the earthquake in Japan that took out Fukushima and a lot of their grid, Tokyo Electric, I believe, just instituted a text messaging campaign to their users when they were approaching, or they knew they were going to approach their ability to serve the public. And so in a situation where it was a real emergency like that, people were willing to change their behavior a little bit to get the community through that emergency until the grid was restored. And it took, you know, I think that they really did that for 7 or 8 months. And the people were, their customers were responsive to that. So we can be pretty creative, I think, but like Mark says, plan for the worst, and having those plans gives you some confidence that going into any situation like this, we've thought through how we can respond. So thanks.
Is there any cooperation among co-ops going on here? Are we reaching out to other co-ops that may already be doing this to see, you know, what plans they have in place?
We have had some conversations with it, and it has been brought up at the Colorado CEO call from time to time. To my knowledge, there's not a specific group of the managers that, you know, those that do and those that don't getting together. But we have a meeting that is coming up in June 8th and 9th, and they are looking for topics. So I will submit this as a topic.
And do you think that it could go to the rate design committee for Tri-State? I mean, demand drives a lot of their, like this year it drove $13 million of extra expense. And it seems like in designing rates, demand response should be at least considered and included.
And I think based on the conversations that Dwayne has had with the CEO group, that they recognize that demand response is an area where they have not done enough work. And as you, I guess, beef up or create a demand response, then part of that is the effect that it will have on rates, and encouraging your member owners to adopt similar policies so that it, you know, there's an incentive, as Kristen said earlier, you know, you can incentivize people to do things and they will do them. you can just say, hey, this is our plan, and they'll probably just ignore it in most cases. So there has to be that carrot to go along with the stick.
Any other questions?
Thanks, Scott. Mr. Finn.
Yes, I submitted my report. Is there any questions on that report?
I had a quick one. Your outages there, is that over the whole year, we're up to 225?
Yep.
Or is that year to date? The other figures on it there, I guess, is what I'm wondering.
Yeah, that's year to date. So we're up to 225. And I think you're going to see that data be better going forward now with our new OMS system. I looked at some of the previous year's data, and it was sometimes not as accurate as I think it should have been. So hopefully, you may see some different numbers as we go forward than we've had in our traditional 5-year.
You just explain a little bit about this, so the SAIDI year to date is 0.58 in 2021. And I know we've had discussions about whether we should even be using SAIDI or we should be looking at circuits individually. But then I'm guessing then the next month SAIDI gets added to that, and then the next month's, is that kind of how it works?
Exactly. It's an average. So it's the, SAIDI stands for the system average duration of interruptions. So that's, you're looking at the duration. So that average will change on a monthly basis and, go up. And obviously, I'm looking at several different metrics now that is available to us with OMS. Katie is one that I look at because it's a combination of not just the durations, but the actual failure rate too. So that's helping us as a reliability team be able to identify those worst performing circuits and be able to, put our resources where is going to give us the most benefit. We're seeing a lot of issues right now in the Winter Park area, and we're able to identify areas, for more bird protection, for potential system hardening to be able to improve that SAIDI over the years. Does that make sense, Liz?
Yeah, thank you, Don.
I'm excited about the data that's getting provided. Now it's just where do we go with it? And one of the biggest things we're doing is educating the line mechanics in regards to, putting good data in, so we had a really good session the other day and talking to them about, when they have an outage of identifying that equipment cause and that cause code, and to be able, so our data is good. So when we're looking at trying to make the system more reliable, it will help us.
And for those of you that don't speak the same terminology that Don does, line mechanic is lineman. So
I'm sorry. Yeah, lineman. Yep. Any other questions?
Yeah, tell me about how the SWOT analysis went, or a little bit what came out of it and how it might inform what you guys do going forward.
Yeah, it went really good, and I'm going to actually present it to the entire organization in June. I believe we talked about. It was awesome to. I went to every separate organization, part of the organization. Whether it be our billing group to our supply chain group, and talking through, what their role was, what they saw as our weaknesses, what they saw as our opportunities going forward. And it actually is helping too with the fire mitigation plan to be able to help with that communication piece with employees. So I think if the one thing, it was communication all the way through and making sure we had that pipeline out there. And some of the handoffs too, it was really evident that, the handoffs when it came to a lot of the requirements for maybe some of the FEMA information, maybe that handoff wasn't solid as it could be. So great exercise.
Thanks, Don.
Yeah.
Stacy?
Sorry about that delay. Couldn't find my mouse. Let's see. Any questions on my report this month? I added some pictures. I hope you all saw that. Just some exciting things going on out in the warehouse and some additional graphs and okay, if there's no questions, I had a couple things just to add. A couple things that wanted you to be aware of is we do have a large amount of cash in our general fund right now. So just pointing out, if you look on page 3 of my board report and part B, and then line 15, right now we have 20 million in cash in the money market and then the general funds. And I always think about this in terms in my mind of we just did a capital credit retirement. The checks went out, and I'll talk more about that last Friday, just under $2 million. We have, I have $3 million for the upcoming community solar projects. Have about 4 to 5 million for phase 1 and 2 of the fiber project that was in the work plan. Had 2 million for our work plan project, 4 million that we've received in aid to construction for some large development projects, 2.5 in capacity, and about 2 to 4 for FEMA work plan projects. So that's a breakdown of that large amount of cash. And as you know, we'll be starting solar and fiber and work plan and spending a lot of the aid to construction money this summer. So just to give you an update on that. Also, something else I'm watching, overhead expenses are down quite a bit. I'm looking at April right now, but you guys have January through March here. Normally this time of year, a lot of the linemen and the crews are normally are not busy on capital projects, but with the fire and the amount of growth that we're experiencing, a lot of their time that would normally be going to an expense account and not a work order is flip-flop this year. And I'm seeing a lot less expense from the work crews and a lot more going to the capitalized projects. And then tree clearing. We spent a lot of time and money so far this year, instead of going to overhead expense and tree clearing, working on fire tree clearing. So just some things that stood out to me. Looks like there, Rob has a question. Stacy, do you discuss these large expenditures? Do you also want to say that we don't have? Oh, yeah. I'm talking about large expenditures. Oh, you're talking about the cash, Rob. So Rob's asking me a question about the cash and asking, because we have these large cash outlays, he's asking if I want to talk about any type of rate increase or the anticipation of a rate increase. Luckily, with these large projects and with Tri-State's discussion of possibly refunding some money, that'll be hopefully a net zero. So if we have large capital projects, the way they affect our financials is over 25, 30 years as we depreciate them, they show up as an expense. So it won't be a large expense hit to the financials, but it'll be over time. So not a direct, large anticipation for any rate increases in the near future. So just to talk about capital credits, they were mailed out May 6th. They were actually printed May 3rd. And yesterday was our largest day of cashing. I saw there were $116,000 worth of capital credits, money cashed, 169 checks. And one cool thing that we have implemented with NASC, just to share with you, again, a plug for NASC, is they have a security feature where we upload with our bank the $2 million worth of capital credit checks with each amount and the name of the member. And it's called a positive pay. So if somebody were to try and get a hold and do some fraudulent activity on our account, we would know right away. It wouldn't match one of those checks that were pre-approved and told to the bank to cash. So if somebody were to come in and say, on this capital credit account, I have $10,000, please cash this check, our bank right away would say, no, this doesn't match anything that the co-op uploaded. So So NISC is able just to upload a file, the bank was able to take it, and we do a matching of every single capital credit check that goes through our bank account. So. Any questions on anything?
That's really cool. I like that. I just want to say, could you have been any closer on the operating revenue and patronage capital through March? I mean, it's like you guys have done a pretty good job with forecasting.
Yeah, thanks. Close. Doesn't always happen that way, but one other thing that we've talked about internally, and with the governor lifting some of the COVID orders and allowing businesses to return to normal. Don't know if you have noticed on this last bill statement, if most of you should have received your personal bill statement from Mountain Parks Electric now. We did have a newsletter attached with some things that we're doing. And also on the statement, we had a little note letting all our members know that online processing fees of $2 will return as of June 1st. And then also a one-time $10 late fee charge will be reinstated if you're late paying. And the interest on late payments will start accruing after June 1st. We had turned those off for the last 14 months because of COVID to allow people to be able to pay late, work payment terms with us. So those will be turning back on June 1st.
And that was related to the one of the governor's executive orders that he had put out about that time 14 months ago. And then he basically, every time it expired, he renewed it. And so it continued on until I believe it was late April, early May that he allowed it to expire. And so rather than just turn it on at that time, we wanted to make sure that we notified members that that was going to happen.
Stacy, do we have are our delinquencies pretty much in line with where we've been in the past now that we're coming out of COVID? Is it pretty steady?
Yep. Yes. Yep. We have someone in charge of delinquents, and she's doing a great job collecting that money, and our members are doing a great job paying it, and no large problems at all. Liz,
are you able to see, because you mentioned the newsletter being attached to the bill, are you guys, I'm sure you're able to see this. Like, for example, I don't get a paper bill.
Correct.
I get the notification, but to see the newsletter, I have to go into Smart Hub.
No, it should be a link on that email notification you received.
Okay, I'll go back and look. But
go to that email.
I tend to look at the newsletter when I'm in Smart Hub, and I'm curious if you're seeing how many people are accessing it or clicking through that way versus like how you're tracking people seeing it. Are we having a lot of members seeing the newsletter? Do we know?
I don't know. I track a lot of things in Smart Hub, just how people pay, the time that they pay, and I'm trying to look at just member use of our Smart Hub system. It has a lot of capabilities. I can see if I can look at the clicks, and
yeah, I mean that even falls into Rob's communication plan too.
Yeah.
So
I did play with it. I did make sure we could see it with my bill and that email that says you have a bill from Mountain Parks Electric, and the amount right under it is a blue link. You can log into Smart Hub and see it. We sent out for all those people to get paper bills, an actual newsletter insert. And then I don't know if you guys did see, Michelle, were you able to upload that newsletter here to, yeah. So the newsletter is uploaded just for you all to review it. If you hadn't seen it yet, is it at the end of my board report? No.
Stacy, it's a separate link. It says what's new at MPE.
Oh, I see it. Yeah, what's new at MPEI mailer. So it's added here, call to order for you guys all to just review.
Casey, how are your lead times on equipment and wire? And are you having any trouble there?
Depending on what it is. So we're getting updates from Western United monthly. Actually, it's more than monthly. We thought initially we could get it monthly, but it's changing every day. we had ordered some transformers and they told us 6 weeks out and we got them a week later. So we decided the warehouse staff is getting an update, and that was Dawn. Dawn really said, hey, let's start doing some scheduling meetings. And if you warehouse team could come to these scheduling meetings with lead times. The biggest lead times we're finding for things that we need, wire seems to be okay right now, but it's some types of transformers, certain types of poles and vaults, concrete vaults. Those could have 6 to 8 week lead time. Some transformers 3 months, but I haven't heard of anything unusual, nothing like the construction industry right now with appliances that are year out or nothing crazy yet.
Okay.
And one of the things that Dawn's group is working on is concrete vaults. Last year we had some major issues with some of our members and the concrete vaults, and it was because our supplier didn't deliver as they should have, and we changed suppliers, but it still was a challenge. And so his group is working on an alternative to the concrete vaults with fiberglass vaults, and they are a couple things. They're easier for us to get, and they're also cheaper, so that it's less cost for the project, whether it be for mountain parks or for the member. And so we're continuing to look at things that we see as long lead time items that there maybe is an alternative for, and try and identify a way to make that the norm for mountain parks, as opposed to waiting on somebody to put together some concrete, which in fact, the one, it took close to 6 months. And I mean, should never have been that long, but there were a number of factors involved in why it didn't happen the way that it should have.
Yeah, so once we know the lead time items, we're able to pull a report in NASC and item commitment. And as soon as the stakers are estimating, we can see what we currently have in stock, what's coming up that we're going to need to order. And then Dave, and Brian in the warehouse are constantly evaluating, and I'm discussing with them on a weekly basis, just, hey, what are we going to need? And they're talking with the stakers. And then we're going to get to where we're having scheduling meetings every week and discussing with the linemen what jobs are priority, and if there's something that was staked right away that could have a long lead time item that's snuck in there. So getting ready for summer.
Yeah, it seems like it's a different issue every time I call my supply house. It could be steel,
Yeah.
It could be, wire. I can't even get distribution panels right now, so it's kind of odd.
Yeah. Any other questions for me?
This is back to ops probably rather than finance, because I noticed that there were LED lights upgraded in the warehouse and saves us money. Have we done that in the garage yet? I mean, we talked about it. I can't remember if those lights have been upgraded and if that's something that.
Yeah, so there's several. There's still a little bit more to do, but most of them all are done. And Jeff, back to your point on the lead time issues, what I'm hearing more of, and I'm hearing it from other co-ops, is it's the end user. It's like the member that's having more of the issues, with finding the meter bases and getting, their conductor for their homes, especially with some of these folks that were affected by the fire. So, I think that's more of an issue right now than, knock on wood, than we're having from our suppliers.
That's good.
And Liz, to your point, we are also looking at doing LED lights in both Kremlin and Walden as well.
Yes.
Yeah, we just got Kremlin ordered. I just saw the invoice. We just put in for Tri-State for the rebate. So that's nice. The LED lights in the warehouse are great. I mean, they don't take any time at all to warm up. They're really bright. There are just so many more advantages than we initially thought, along with the cost savings. So Dave pushed that project through. Now he's pushing Kremlin through, and yeah, Walden next.
Okay, Joe, you ready? Nope.
Yeah, I'm ready. So you have my report. If there's questions about that, I'll answer them. If I also have just a little to talk about the Colonial pipeline hack, if anybody is interested in that as well.
I think there's interest, Joe.
Yes.
So as you know, it was just about a week ago that the Colonial pipeline control systems were hacked, shutting down the pipeline for the better part of a week. Actually, a little over a week. I think it just began operating again today in some capacity. The group that is being identified and I believe is basically claimed responsibility for it is a group called the Dark Side or Dark Side. There's some affiliation to nation states, the Russians named. They are actually denying that connection, largely due to previous, at least the rumor mill has it, that largely due to the fact that they, being associated with a nation state makes the retaliation from the NSA or other groups that much harder when it's associated with a nation, an attack from a nation on another nation. If it's just a hacking group out for some monetary gain, it seems to be taken quite a bit differently in those circles. One interesting point that has come is that a little bit of background. Up until about 2017, 2018, the US was by far and away the leader in anything related to cyber hacking, cybersecurity. No one was even close. 2017, a gentleman by the name of Edward Snowden released mountains of classified documents onto the world and classified software. A lot of what he released were hacking tools that the NSA had developed. Most of these attacks these days are being done by outside groups using tools that our government developed. Not all, but many. There's already rumor on the net and on the web and various places that this was another use of an NSA tool against their own country. Many of the times, if you follow Ukraine's grid has been shut down about 4 or 5 times in the last 4 or 5 years, large sections of it. Many of the attacks have been attributed to the Russians, but most of the tools or methods they used were methods that we developed internal here at the NSA developed. The pipeline attack has a lot of implications. It's the first major attack on a U.S. like this, of this magnitude, especially one that lasted several days. There have been other smaller attacks. Most of them were handled inside of a day, maybe 2 at the tops, or much more limited in scope. Just comes on the heels of all the other things we've had going on with the NSA and the various government agencies coming off solar winds and all the other avenues. It's led us to reach out to all of our vendors to see what interoperability they have. I mean, we know that like NISC, they are the software purveyor for 700-800 different cooperatives. Some are telephone cooperatives, some are electric cooperatives, some mix of the two. My new focus is now how these agencies could pivot. So if the attack doesn't come from Mountain Parks, but the attack comes from some other co-op somewhere else, can they use, or how can they use the path through NISC to get back to us or to anyone else on the network? It's always been an avenue, but now with these attacks, and I mean, I don't know, I've been told that they actually do even have companies that purchase. NISC has companies that work for them that purchase or sell natural gas as well. And they actually do sell natural gas supplied by this pipeline. And they actually have connections to this pipeline. So it's just another avenue. That's why the first bullet in my board report is to still investigate that. Now, NISC has not yet been, or claims to not have yet been, the subject of a hack. Security experts, many security experts would argue that it's just because they haven't found it yet, but we hope that's not true. Anyway, if there's any other questions, let me know. But that's what I know so far. Details are still sketchy. I expect we'll be hearing about this one for quite some time.
Hey, Joe, I had read that it didn't affect the operational side, just the IT side, so they can silo those two sides. So when you say NISC, that would be a silo from, say, SCADA, or does that mean there's a firewall there?
Yeah. It's so I guess the best way the way I think about it, Jeff, is that the lines are so blurry anymore, where IT stops and operation starts, without being able to control or monitor the pressures on that pipeline and everything else. Even though they can turn the switch and make the stuff flow through it, safety is dramatically compromised, and on down the list. It was purely an IT hack. I mean, they claim that it was a ransomware attack. There's a lot of speculation right now that it was a ransomware attack as a disguise to truly just, I mean, they're disguising it as a monetary request of a couple $1 million or a few $1 million, versus the real goal was to disrupt the energy supply. The money was, sure, if they paid it, great, but they really didn't care.
Yeah, I had the same question, because you had said it was their control systems were hacked, and it seems like that's still, like there's a lot of talk about whether their operational systems were hacked or not. I read the FBI bulletin, and I had never really realized that there's ransomware as a service. So you create the ransomware, and then you let independent actors use the ransomware, and then they pay whoever developed the ransomware for the service.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh my God, like there's a whole parallel universe of the bad use of all these things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we think about, what the services we have NISC provide for us, and then there's this whole other thing. So that was amazing to me. But one of the things that I got from the FBI bulletin was really, we've tried to do a really good job, or spent a lot of focus on preventing these attacks and preventing people from getting into our systems. And the resources to plan for recovery and mitigation maybe aren't as robust.
Right.
And so that was something that I just want to, as a board or as a board member, I feel like, again, it's kind of planned for the worst, as Mark was saying. Hopefully we won't have to use it, but making sure that we have the ability to, and a plan and procedures, like if this happens, how we respond. And I know it's two-pronged, we have to try to prevent it, but then also, what equipment do we have on hand to get us back up running? How does that all look? And I know that I don't need to know all those things. I just need to know that you guys are working on it and there's a plan.
So, and just to that broad point, Liz, we're working on several different options. So, I mean, we have options where if backups are on site, and that protects us under certain circumstances. And then there's storage. Now we also are going to store a copy of the most critical data at NISC itself in there. And that also comes with certain risk associated with it. But no one solution. There has to be at least as many as possible, as many as feasible. I'm just a believer. The more tools in your toolkit, the better off. The more pots and possibility copies of data and backups you can have, and all that is really the best way to go about it. and truly the weakest link is the end user. I mean, is that spam email they get. I mean, email is by far the largest attack vector right now. Don't know if it'll be that way forever, but currently it's.
Should we send out a warning to all staff? Like, really be sure you don't click on any links.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I sent out an email Monday morning, and actually I was surprised. Quite a few people called and emailed back and came in and asked questions about it. And basically I know people get a certain amount of anxiety when they delete an email that they don't know about, because you're like, oh, am I blowing someone off? Am I not doing my job? Am I not, but I try to tell them, you're not gonna, there's no trouble to be had for deleting something that looked suspicious to you. I'm happy to apologize to somebody I should have answered an email and suspected it to be or nefarious of some sort.
Well, and we do training for the staff, and then our training company does generate emails that they send to people just to see if they will open. And when you open it, then it says, this is maybe something you shouldn't have opened, and it explains why. And so it's a training tool for our staff. It's something that is hopefully a constant reminder for staff that, something that seems very innocent cannot be. And we encourage them that if they see something that looks a little odd, that they contact the IT folks, because they can either give them advice or they look at it. And I call Joe frequently when I get some stuff and it's like, this just looks a little off. And one was actually from FERC. It said, click on this link and verify your credentials. Well, it was a legitimate email because every so often they want you to do that. But, looking at it, and it hopefully is changing our culture to where that within mountain parks, we start to question some of this stuff. And maybe it's not a real problem with the email that you see, but ask the question before you open it up.
I'll just point out that I sent an email to Mark about cybersecurity, but it went from a different address. And Mark picked up the phone and called me and said, hey, did you send me an email? So I know it goes from, the top all the way down to the bottom. And I appreciate that skepticism, and just all of us. I have to say I was asked to participate in the Colorado Country Life thing. And I'm still like, I need to call Mona and make sure that this is really legitimate, because, if someone really looked, they could probably string me along, and maybe I have been strung along, but luckily it's not on my Mountain Parks computer. So I'm separate from what we have.
And just to add, in the second half of this year, we will be enhancing the existing education that we do. One of Tori's goals, she has some background in cybersecurity, and one of her goals is to develop and enhance our existing training that we do to the employees now. So hopefully we'll see some improvements there, and more comprehensive training coming.
Joe, this is Carl. I heard on the news here just recently that Colonial paid the $5 million ransom, and shortly after they turned on. But educate me a little bit about ransomware. I assume they put it on whatever they put it on, but can they turn it off just as fast? And also, why is there not a way to trace that money back to the initiators of the attack and locate them in that fashion?
So, number one, Carl, they can turn it on and turn it off, because what ransomware does is it just takes your data and encrypts it, or whatever application or configuration that you're using. So the ransomware malware gets onto your computer, your network, your servers, whatever your architecture is like. And when activated, it takes the data that it can find and encrypts it. Basically, it makes it so that you can't read your own data. Now, what you're paying for, the $5 million, is for the person that created the ransomware to give you the key, the encryption key, to unlock your data. It's truly a flip of a switch. One of the things that we'll be doing is creating some immutable backups here that have a time stamp where they cannot, once the backup's created, they cannot be changed in any way for a period of time. And that's one way to guard against that, because it's immutable. It can only be read. It can't be altered once it's in an immutable state. But the other side of that question is tracing the money. And I'm no expert, but there's lots of ways to transfer money using cryptocurrencies and all kinds of other things these days to send money around the world. Now, many cryptos will actually claim to be more traceable than regular currencies because there's a blockchain and a ledger and all that, and it's immutable, and so they can see who got that money. But there's also ways to hide it, especially when you go through lots of different foreign transactions and bounce it all over the world. So that's probably more of a question for a forensic accountant. Yeah,
Joe,
Mark.
speaking of that, and Mark, I think we've discussed this before, but Mark, we get those Barracuda encrypted messages from you. I still get those, and I'm probably the least savvy computer guy in the world. But refresh me again on those. I just delete them. I get them from Mark, and I get them from Jeff. Can you just refresh me on that? Because I just delete that shit.
Sure. So that's kind of, well, it's a problem. But essentially, that came out where, due to HIPAA, we have the responsibility to protect PHI, and HIPAA stipulates that in order to transfer PHI, you have to do it in an encrypted fashion. Yeah.
Personal health information.
Yes, sorry, PHI.
Personal in acronyms.
Yes, sorry, PHI, personal health information. So one of the things, and our Barracuda is one of our firewalls, our spam filter firewalls, not internet traffic firewalls, but the part that handles the email portion. One of the features of it is a PHI, I think it's called PHI filter. And so when it sees an email that has potentially, that has content that is potentially identified as PHI, personally identifiable health information or personal health information, it encrypts that email and sends you a link, the recipient a link to get that information. It is absolutely not the best way to do it. It is absolutely not foolproof in that it just looks at the email and the content for patterns, things like social security numbers or things that could be social security numbers or phone numbers or addresses. When we bought that email filter, we bought it because it was good at protecting industrial control systems and things along those lines. PHI wasn't really a consideration when we bought it. So its ability to identify PHI is probably not the best. Actually, I know it's not the best. But I felt it was prudent to turn it on, being that we are now a covered entity, being that we are now self-insured. So that's what that is. It's oftentimes it's false positives, Mark, in that it identified something as containing PHI that truly wasn't PHI, but there was a number in that document, or there was something that it believed was a social security number, or it had a term that it associated with a health condition or a medical condition or anything like that. Yes.
Seems like anything that said COVID in it got encrypted.
Right.
COVID,
and I think we have
pandemic.
fixed that part of it, but Mark, you're right. I mean, it will encrypt things. I sent an email to Levi and I said, give me some times that you're available to discuss this. And it encrypted that. And then Levi sent it back and it's like, why is it encrypting something from Levi? And it was because it had encrypted my initial email. So it is not, as Joe said, it's not perfect. And so sometimes it will encrypt things that it doesn't necessarily need to, but because of some of the things that we've got, one of them being that we're partially self-insured, we have to have a system in place that it can catch as many of these things as possible.
True.
Okay, that I understand that a little bit better. Encrypted equals shit can to me. Thanks.
Anything else?
All right, Mark, are you our HR person?
I am your HR person and attempting to answer any questions that I possibly can of the report that Jessica provided to you, as well as the employee housing timeline. And we will be discussing at least one item in her report in executive session, and it's related to open positions and specifically what we're doing with reallocation of resources based on potential retirements and other things.
Mark, I lost you for just a sec. Did you say we are going to discuss some cross-training things in executive?
Yes, we're going to discuss in executive session some of the items that are in her report related to reallocation of resources, cross-training with departure or retirement of some of our employees.
Thanks. I had a question on that and I'll save it for then.
Well, looks like you got off easy, Mark.
Well, I'm going to have to give Jessica a bad time and tell her that she should let me do a report more often.
All right, Mr. Taylor.
Hey, good morning. So I just have to start out as someone who writes a lot and loves writing, and language. I have to tip my hat to Joe Palmer in the IT world for giving us the nuggets: attack vector, PHI filter, and immutable. Excellent stuff.
Rob, I thought you were going to talk about awards.
Oh, okay. Well, I can't. Although, Joe is just an unending source of some really good phraseology. So you have my report. We did record the community roundtable segment for the annual meeting. Liz was part of that. Thank you, Liz. We're waiting for the final audio file of that from Tri-State. I can probably send that out to the board to listen to before the annual meeting. And then Mark also pre-recorded his general manager speech, and we pre-recorded the announcement of our scholarship and essay winners. So much of the annual meeting, when you get there June 12th at the fairgrounds, is going to be pre-recorded. There will be some live speakers, of course. And we're working on the final details of registering people, and just if you need kind of an oversight of how that's going to work, as the people come into the fairgrounds at the annual meeting, we will be handing them their registration bags and their breakfast burrito and their drinks and directing them to park. And then our employees will walk up to their cars and register them on the iPad after they park. So that's kind of the plan of how we're going to get everybody situated. One new wrinkle that we're discussing and trying to arrange is during the national anthem and the Pledge of Allegiance to see if we can get a 4-H fair royalty person dressed in full cowboy gear carrying a flag kind of weaving through the cars so they can see that. But we also have a plan to put a flag on a bucket truck and hoist that up. And we did receive confirmation from West Grand School District that they will park their electric bus there, not for test drives, but for people to see and for us to reference in the annual meeting. So it's coming together. The director election, we have all the materials submitted to the third-party vendor, SBS, up in Minnesota. who is conducting the counting of the election ballots. And they will mail out all the mail ballots to the District 4 members no later than May 14th, and that is tomorrow. And so that gives us just a few extra days for people to vote and get those votes mailed back if they choose to vote by mail. We do have the ballot box that we have at the Granby office is completed. It's wrapped, and it will be out front in the Granby office May 18th. And when SBS arrives the day before the annual meeting, they will then count those ballots. So that all seems to be coming along pretty well. So those are my two major updates I wanted to talk to you about this time, was the annual meeting and the director election. I won't go into every detail, but I will open it up for questions. Anything you want to ask me about that or what's in my report, we can discuss right now.
You said there's an election in District 4?
Correct.
Who are the candidates, if I may be so bold as to ask?
Yes, Noble Underbrink and Mark Volt.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Liz, you're going to have to unmute.
A quick question on the ballot box. Those guys are going to come count those ballots. And then is that going to be closed, or will additional ballots get counted with if anyone drops a ballot in there between then and the meeting?
Yeah, it will be.
Will that get thrown into the meeting count, or?
Yes, it will be closed. It will be closed after they pull those out.
Okay.
So then their option will be to attend the annual meeting the very next day and vote in person.
Okay, so
that information is provided as part of the ballot when that box closes. And so our plan is, after the ballots are removed by the third party, we will then remove the ballot box so nobody can put another ballot into it.
Yes, and along those lines, Liz, in the June CCL, we're listing the 3 ways you can vote in the election. And one of them, of course, is by drop box. And in there is the deadline that ballots must be dropped off no later than 12 p.m. noon, essentially June 11th, the day before the annual meeting.
Okay, and then one other thing I noticed on my petition is, in the petition, the language was that it was the language that was prior to us changing the election policy and getting rid of that postmark date. So in the petition, it said postmarked by such and such arrived.
Okay.
I can't remember that language, but I just think it would be good to clarify with the 2 candidates running, in case they're out campaigning, that what they need to tell people is the ballots need to be in Minnesota by less than such date. And
okay,
other way. I just, that's just one little detail. I think that it's probably very minor, but
okay,
because we have that out, we put it on the petition. I think it's probably fair to just let both.
Sure.
Do you know what I'm talking about, Mark, on that petition?
I know what you're talking about, Liz. I'll double check that petition. And I think Mark, you mean Mark Volt?
Yes, and Mark said yes, even though he didn't unmute himself.
Okay, and I can contact Noble and talk to him about that.
Thanks.
And do you want to, I know it's a ways out, Rob, but do you want to talk about our test drive event?
Yes, State of Colorado Energy Office contacted us with this opportunity for July to bring, I think it's 5 to 8 electric vehicles up to our service area and allow people to take a 5-minute test drive of an electric car. And so, we looked into it a little bit and thought this would be a very good idea. So we went ahead and scheduled that for July 22nd at the high school in Granby. And we will begin advertising that in the next short while here and inviting our members to come up. And we don't know what the electric vehicles are yet. The Energy Office works with dealerships to acquire those. But anyway, this will be a great opportunity. July 22nd, I believe, is a Thursday. And so we're going to encourage our members to come join us and test drive those vehicles for themselves, including our Tesla. So we'll have our Tesla up there too. And if any board members want to come, we'd love to have you for sure.
Could we get the school bus there potentially, even if it just sits there?
Boy, I don't, maybe. The school is very cooperative in bringing it over to the fairgrounds, which isn't too far. I don't know how many times we can ask them to bring it to different things. So I can check into it.
But you won't be able to drive the school bus, unfortunately.
Yes.
Well, unless you have a Class C CDL.
No, you won't be able to drive it even if you have that, because it belongs to the school and they're not going to allow somebody else to drive it.
Speaking of drives, now that COVID is starting to, people are getting vaccinated, do we have any plans to go forward with the original intent to allow members to test drive the Tesla?
We're still working on that, because at this point we would need to disinfect it every time somebody goes in, and I assume that the Colorado Energy Office has come up with a way to do that, for their test drives.
All right, thanks.
All right, thanks, Rob.
Okay, thank you.
Bills for payment. Any questions on the bills? Nothing. All right. Open board forum, associated reports.
I did have a question on those bills. There was one down there, a credit card that was still out to Rich. Way down at the very end. I don't have it in front of you. To Rich Strutzel. A credit card deal. What was that about?
And that may be a charge that
It's,
go ahead.
I think Joe stopped that. I'm not sure. That was his Zoom charge every month. And
yeah, that was it.
Yep. Yeah. His credit card has been stopped, so it should reject it. But Joanne noticed that. She's the one that processes the credit cards. It was his Zoom account. He had committed for a year. Joe, want to make sure we got him in with our annual or company Zoom.
Okay. I wasn't aware that he committed for a year. That's the, okay.
Yeah.
We'll look at it.
Okay.
I'll get rid of that.
But one of the things that we have done, Mark, is that we had a few employees that had Zoom accounts and they were billed on the company credit card. And what we have gone to is a company Zoom account, so that it's a single account, and actually it ends up being cheaper than it is to have multiple other accounts.
Okay. Dick, you got anything, Western United?
You need to unmute yourself, Dick. Dick, you need to unmute yourself.
They're having a fantastic year. The back orders are unbelievable. The expansion now in Utah's going forward, as well as the one in north of Vegas. The name just popped out of my mind. But one of the items they're working with is they have a piece of property next to their Brighton facility, and there's someone that's developing a site next to theirs and wants to get an easement. And by giving them the easement, they're willing to take care of helping with the resurfacing of the additional lot that we have next to our property, and building a water retention pond that's required by Brighton. So we're looking forward to finishing negotiations with them on that. And no cost to us, and it'll enable a lot of the trucks that we have, or that Western United has, to use the new entrance and exit. So aside from that, Greg's doing a fantastic job. The company's going forward, and there don't seem to be any problems that they could see, and they're having a good year. Sometimes it bounces between municipals and for the construction industry. Oil and gas is a little suspect, but it hasn't seemed to affect their operations. Aside from that, they had their audit. The audit was approved by the board, and everything else seems to be going well, unless somebody has questions.
Hey, did they talk about any inventory problems at all, or foreseeing any back ordered items, or?
They have some problems with some items that are back ordered, but I don't remember exactly which ones they are. I believe transformers was one area of concern. Aside from that, one of the big things they're trying to do is get their cable cutting facility finalized, getting the machinery brought in, and that's supposed to come in the next couple of months. Most of the items that they said they had a problem with are some of the real large transformers, which we usually don't get involved in. But they've been placing orders as they go and trying to build up their inventory. Their inventory has increased probably almost 100% over the last couple of years, and they're trying to get it to the point where they can ship stuff easier from their facility rather than doing direct shipping. And what they're also doing is they're rearranging where shipments take place from now that they have their Albuquerque office, they have their Utah facility, and now they'll have the one in, I think, St. George. And once all that is done, they're going to reorganize where items get shipped from to get it closer to the co-ops. But yeah, they're having problems just like everybody else, and they're trying to mitigate it by placing orders in the future and building up their inventory.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
Dick, isn't there an NRECA resolution thing coming up?
Yes, they have to be submitted by June. And normally, if somebody wants to submit a resolution, the co-ops, at least in Colorado, submit it to CREA. CREA then reviews it and will submit it to NRECA. So I noticed you had an idea for one, and it was just a blurb, and I didn't know whether there was a lot more detail you wanted to add to it.
Yeah, I wanted to discuss that today in open session. So you all probably saw the letter that Mark forwarded, where all the co-op CEOs, and I think it was in the tri-state area, reached out to NRECA to ask them to support Tri-State's position on debt relief. And I wanted to know if that's something that the board would like to consider proposing, or if there's anything we can do to support if there's already a resolution underway or in the works with regard to this.
I have not seen any resolutions come forward. We usually don't see those until we get to our meeting in September. So what I would suggest is if the board is in favor of that we forward something to CREA, or to Jeff can take it to CREA. And if CREA feels this is something that's worthwhile, they'll forward it to NRECA. That's normally how it works.
I thought that, I might be wrong here, Carl can answer this, but wasn't Tri-State and Sierra Club working on something for that?
I think you're correct. I haven't seen it yet, but at the last meeting, they are working to propose their own resolution on the stranded assets.
So here's what I know and can share with the board. The Biden administration has proposed something like $15 billion for debt relief for cooperative G&Ts, but that information does not seem to be being shared or promoted by NRECA amongst the G&Ts. So Tri-State probably understandably would like to go after some of that funding given their Colorado mandates and the potential to help out some of the coal communities that might be impacted. The string attached to that debt relief is that any coal generation assets that are retired have to be replaced by renewables, which, you know, economics is kind of driving anyway. So, you know, like I reviewed that letter that you had sent around, Mark. Seems like it's something that's unanimously supported by the Colorado co-ops in tri-state territory. So I would certainly be in favor of asking our state association to do something resolution-wise to try and get NRECA at least not to oppose what tri-state is doing. My understanding is they had some objection to a GNT collaborating or attempting to collaborate with the Sierra Club, but Carl would know more than I.
I don't know where that, Kristen, I guess I'm confused on some of those points. I mean, I've heard you're not the only one that said that NRECA is not working with that issue, but I know that their talking points that I used for the legislative calls a couple of weeks ago to our legislators, that, you know, my talking points included, you know, stranded assets and leaving those communities behind. So I'm still a little, I don't get it.
The letter a little bit more, because I think the letter articulated what was going on.
Okay. Yeah, you're not the first person I've heard that from, so I was just kind of confused on what that meant.
I believe that Dwayne has indicated that the NRECA president contacted him, you know, and suggested that their push for the stranded asset was causing issues for NRECA with some of the legislation that they were pushing, and they kind of wanted them to stop. And Dwayne has had conversations with them, and it was actually shared at the last Tri-State CEO meeting that I think they're making some progress, but NRECA is moving more towards a neutral position on it than asking to not do it at all.
Hey, Mark, has anybody talked with Joe Martin, who's our NRECA rep for this region? He might be able to shed some light on the reasons that they're against this, or shed a little light on the inner workings of where they're going. And I don't know who's the appropriate person to talk to Joe, whether that should come from us or from CREA. And is he on CREA's board, Jeff? No? Okay. I'm just not sure the right path for this, because I know the resolutions, if we suggest one, should go to CREA and then they forward it to NRECA. It might be a good idea. If you want me to talk to Joe, I can, or Mark, if you want to talk to him, figure out where NRECA is and maybe how we can word this in such a way that they won't be opposed to it.
Well, I think
Dick,
Carl might have some input.
Dick, this is Carl. Yes, Rick Gordon, the chairman of the board at Tri-State, is Joe Martin is in his co-op, so he is talking to him. But what Dwayne relayed to us at the meeting here, the first of the month, is why NRECA is not backing this stranded asset issue, is because of a lot of the East Coast co-ops that still have coal. They are fearful that if NRECA backs this kind of a proposal, that is just an indication more so of the death of coal. And so they're tying that into NRECA agreeing with closing coal plants. So I think that's the contention, and my assumption is that the East Coast co-ops, Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, all the coal producers back there have a little more influence over NRECA than we do out here out west. That's what I know.
Well, even if the resolution gets shot down, you know, if the Western co-ops are more aligned in accepting billions of dollars, which I would argue it's our fiduciary duty to consider, I'd love to see CREA and or others consider how we could support a resolution at the NRECA process. But I'm a novice here, so I trust, you, Jeff and Dick, to be able to figure out if and how that could work.
Yeah, I think we gotta try to support Tri-State in their effort.
Exactly.
Work
Yeah.
and work on the language that works for Tri-State, and then get it through CREA if it's possible before June. I don't know how that works, but I'm not. It seemed like for a while CREA had backed out on going through the whole resolution process because it was so.
No.
Or are you still in that? Okay.
Yeah.
So let's try to, and if it has to, if Mountain Parks has to drive this because other co-ops they're supportive, but they're not willing to drive it, or really, I'm in favor of us doing what we can to support Tri-State in having this included in whatever legislation comes through. So
Yeah, I would agree with you, Liz. I would like to see it. I mean, hopefully we could, tag on with Tri-State if that's the road they're going to go, they go down. If not, I mean, I guess we can do something on our own, but they're the ones that are really the expert in this, I would hope. But I just sent them, I'm not sure I sent them before, but impact studies for Craig and Nucla out from Tri-State on those communities. So, there's just some more, information that Tri-State has.
Jeff, would it make sense for us to vote on something to send to CREA? Or do you think it might be better to figure out if Tri-State should approach CREA, and because you have a meeting coming up at the end of the month, which would be timing wise, get it into NRECA resolutions committee before their June deadline. So I don't know what the best way to do it would be.
I'd like to, I guess first see if it's going to come from Tri-State, and then if we can jump on that.
Well, I don't know if Tri-State goes into NRECA resolutions. That's why I thought it might be good to go through CREA and see if they're willing to put forth a resolution or recommended a resolution on behalf of G&Ts with stranded assets. I don't know the proper way to get it to CREA so that they could look at it. Do we need to propose something, or can you just bring that to them on our behalf?
Well, Tri-State is a member of CREA. They
are, yeah.
So maybe we can work with Tri-State and figure out what that avenue is and what it looks like, and with the goal of getting something through the CREA board at the next meeting.
Yeah.
NRECA.
And I can reach out to Dwayne and ask him how we might be able to support their efforts.
Okay.
Perfect. Liz, did you have something for Green Power?
Green Power just met. The financials are looking good. We're not going to reduce rebate. Well, they're not going to reduce rebate amounts right now. Still working on the weatherization, and waiting to hear more about solar care. So I saw that mentioned in Levi's report, and don't want to bore the entire board with it. Anyway, that's where we are. And there was a discussion about Green Power has put aside a little bit of money for energy storage, and sort of discussing how
Speak up, Liz.
Green Power has put in this year has a little bit of money set aside for energy storage, and next year the same thing, and sort of figuring out what that looks like and how it can aid Mountain Parks' understanding about energy storage. So there's some thought about that, and I'm sure staff will be talking about it. So that's the report.
Has Green Power ever sponsored an energy storage project yet?
Nope, but that's something we asked Chris Chris and Rob. I'm sure, Green Power, it's a little bit awkward because Chris works for Mark and Rob works for Mark, not for the Green Power Board. So the Green Power Board can throw out some ideas about, hey, what are we going to do with energy storage? We could do this, that, and the other thing. But really, I think it part of it has to come from staff saying, hey, this is what we think we'd like to do with energy storage to support our strategic plan, and Green Power, can you help? So, you know, we looked at, like I sent out the Fort Collins utility. They have an energy storage program and a rebate structure, and they've developed even 4 pre-approved energy storage systems and line drawings of various ways that are okay to set up energy storage on their system. So there's been a lot of work done. It's just a matter of where Mountain Parks wants to go with it. But I think the Green Power Board is very interested in having energy storage help with the capacity factor of renewable installations and also shaving peak. So, do you have a project, Justin?
Yeah, I believe he said no.
Carl, what do you got?
Well, since our meeting this month was a week later than Tri-State's, I think I sent all the board highlights that Dwayne and Rick put out, so you should have got those on the email. A couple of things that I will bring up is the language of the bylaw amendments. Should come in next month. The modification of the 2 bylaws that were passed at the special board meeting will be voted on in August. Rick Gordon announced that he is not going to run for chairman of the board in August, so there'll be a new chairman. The COVID update is they expect employees back to the office by May 17th. And some information about the Texas freeze. Wall Street hedge funds were the big winners of that. And there was 2 Texas gas companies that made about $200 million off of that short period of time. Yampa Valley had a $6.5 million hit. How they're going to handle it is add a rider to the bill for 7 months. Grand Valley had a $1.2 million hit, and they're going to put a rider on also, but spread it over 12 months. Holy Cross got hit by $2.3 million and will not put a rider or an increase in the bill, but they have a rainy day fund that they will cover it with. Some of the Texas co-ops that were hit hugely are going to amortize the loss over 30 years and charge a $35 a month extra fee to members' bills for 30 years. And that's about all I have that isn't in the highlights that you should have on the email.
Some of those Texas co-ops, wow, 35 for 30 years.
Yeah, well, one of the Texas co-ops, I think, their bill was close to $1 billion.
Can't they just declare bankruptcy and start fresh?
Well, they did. The one with the $1 billion did declare bankruptcy, but some of the others, obviously, it was a large sum of money, significantly more than the ones that Carl talked about in Colorado. But I don't think they're looking to declare bankruptcy, but they're also looking for a way to try and recoup the money. So.
Yeah, is that all settled? I mean, it seemed like the PUC or whatever it was down there set a very high floor for a couple days, 2 or 3 days beyond the emergency, and that's where a lot of the price gouging happened and cost to the consumer.
Mark,
how did Yampa Valley, Holy Cross, and Grand Valley, how did they take a hit on that? And did Mountain Parks, did we take any kind of hit from that? You expound on that a little?
We did not, and those three are customers of Excel. And so Excel had a large hit, and they then spread it out to their customers that buy power from them. Their own customers, they're going before the PUC to come up with a methodology to collect that from their own customers. And it will be over an extended period of time, I believe, at least 2 years.
And aren't they being challenged for not issuing a demand response call? So it's kind of related to what Tri-State's now dealing with. There are some consumer advocates who are arguing, look, Excel should have to not charge this to its customers. They should take it out of their investors' profits because management failed to curtail or issue a demand response call, which could have helped them save money on gas bills. That's my understanding. Somebody clarify if I misconstrued.
Yeah, that's what I heard. I heard that or read the response from Excel when they were asked why they didn't let people know that this was a could be a serious issue, and they said we only let them know when it's when it's going to be a full-blown emergency, and this isn't a full-blown emergency. Essentially, that's what they said. And whereas Tri-State clearly let Mountain Parks know that, hey, we're having an emergency, we might shut you off. I mean, it's totally two different approaches. My thought as a director is like, oh my God, you've got 18 lifts at Winter Park with people on them, and it's cold, and this is really going to affect our members. So I'm thinking, okay, what would we pay in gas fees to keep the lights on? But we tried people to shed loads. We tried to get them advance notice, even though it was only a half an hour, to let them know this was going to happen. And Excel didn't do that. Didn't tell those co-ops, I don't think, that, oh, by the way, you might get depending on how much electricity you're using during these periods of time, you may get a big bill for it. They didn't send that out. So, I mean, clearly we can all respond better than we responded. And there needs
It's not just electricity either. I'm sure you guys saw, if you're cooking with natural gas, you saw your bill last month, and I know our house doubled. And there's a line item right on the bill, fuel costs from Excel.
Is that a one-time thing, or is that going to be like?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would assume so, Kristen. It looks like just fuel costs for that month.
Makes our heat pump program look all the better.
Yep.
I'd like to commend Tri-State for their response to this, from the little bit that I understand of this, compared to Excel and some of these other companies switching over from gas to diesel fuel for their generation during all this. I think they are to be commended to the nth degree for how they handled this, in my humble opinion.
No, it was good planning for sure on their part, I think, too. Anybody got anything else? Open board forum?
Do you have anything from CREA, Jeff?
No, not much. I'm trying to keep you guys updated on the bills as they're coming and going and changing. But other than that, unless anybody has any questions. Okay. Looks like we have a need for a services meeting.
Well, I don't think we have any old or new business.
Oh yeah, I kind of glossed over that. Sorry. Do we have any old business? I'm sorry.
I think Kristen may have something.
No, more like new business. Just wanted
business.
to extend an invitation to anyone interested at Mountain Parks and the Board staff. CU Boulder is hosting an event at the Solar Decathlon House. They won the competition, so they actually took first place, and they're holding an event here on June 23rd and 24th, where you can ask questions about their design process, the demand response features, and energy controls that they built in, so on and so forth. So if anyone's interested, would be happy to host y'all.
I just have a question. Is that in person? Come to your house and look at it? Or is
It is actually an in-person event. The thought was that, by that time, most people will have had the opportunity to be vaccinated. We do ask that you still wear a mask inside to protect those that might be unvaccinated, but yeah, it's in person.
Well, I'm curious if we might, as a board and staff, kind of schedule a time when we all could go. And I was going to suggest, and it's funny you bring this up because I was going to ask you about this. I think it'd be awesome if the board saw the project, but also if the Housing Authority director was invited, and perhaps Megan Ledeen of the Grand Foundation and Helen Sadler, and sort of really get the community, so that people get introduced to the idea of super efficient homes as part of the solution for the housing problem that we have.
Yeah, that'd be lovely. I'm sure CU would love that.
If we could arrange that, like if maybe we figure out who's available on the 23rd or the 24th, which makes sense for the board, and do it more as a group.
Also, Liz wanted to extend that to the Green Power Advisory Committee as well.
I don't know what you want to do.
Well, I'll send some details.
Were they taxable?
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mountain Park Services meeting. Looks like we have a need for one.
Yes, I have a question before we start, and it's for Levi. Levi, by putting the minutes and listing old business, new business, review of financials, and set meeting schedule, but not having an actual agenda, can we discuss those things? That all of the items are listed under the meeting agenda for Mountain Parks, and there doesn't seem to be an agenda for Mountain Park Services. My question is, can we go through and discuss those things without it being posted?
Two things. So I think the reason you're asking the question is because of the rules that apply to Mountain Parks Electric. Different rules apply to services. Second, to me, because the directors, this does qualify as an agenda for services. So for both reasons, yes, you can. I would say when we get to meeting schedule, we need to remember that we do need to hold a annual shareholders meeting and then a board meeting immediately after that to elect the officers.
Okay. Well, in that case, I'll call the meeting of Mountain Park Services to order. Let it show that all of the board members are present. We do have a quorum. First order of business is to approve the minutes of the meeting of August 13th, 2020. If I have a motion to do that. Liz, and who seconded? Jeff seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Okay, that passes. Is there any old business to discuss? Hearing none, move on. Any new business? Hearing none, move on to review the financials, which were provided in the financial statement section of Mountain Parks Electric, and there were no questions raised then. I'd make the assumption that there's no problem with the financials. And we'll move on to setting a meeting schedule. Any recommendations for how often or when we should set a meeting schedules? Open up to the board.
So again, real quick, through the bylaws, you are required to have a annual meeting of the shareholders, which is Mountain Parks Electric is the sole shareholder. So I would recommend holding that meeting next month on the same day as the Mountain Parks Electric board meeting, and then holding, you can then immediately hold another board meeting of Mountain Park Services to then elect officers for the following year.
Without objection, I recommend that we take our attorney's advice, and somebody want to put that in the form of a motion?
And just for reference, our next meeting is June 10th.
I move that that Mountain Park Services schedule its annual meeting for June 10th. And that subsequently a meeting of Mountain Park Services be held to elect officers.
We have a second.
Second.
Moved by Liz, seconded by Jeff. Any further discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. The only other item I'd like to mention is that we've set an annual meeting. I don't know whether we need to do a formal motion, but I think that in the future, we can set schedules for any other meetings as the need arises and not have a set schedule. If that's okay with the board, I don't know whether we have to put that in a formal motion. We can just set these meetings as circumstances require. I don't know if that suffices, Levi.
So the one thing I would recommend would be to, I'm just thinking this as I go here. So at the next meeting, the next board meeting, I think you should schedule the next year's annual shareholder meeting and board meeting immediately following it. And then other than that, yes, they can be as needed.
Okay. Then there's any other business to be conducted? Hearing none, meeting's adjourned.
All right, thanks, Dick.
I think that perhaps we would want to break for lunch and then come back for the executive session after lunch.
Yeah, maybe should we move into executive session prior so we can cut the live stream? Would that be easier to do?
That
make more
is
sense?
easier, yes.
Okay. So if we could get a motion to go into executive session for, if you guys are looking at your iPads, there's 4 items.
I'll make a motion to go into executive session for drought and MPE preparations, tri-state settlement, president discussion, and member confidentiality.
Okay. I've got insurance options on mine too.
And insurance
different. Okay.
And then Levi representation related to FERC.
I'll second
Perfect.
that.
Or a second by Dick. Any further discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, looks like we're in executive session.